Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated, everyone. Thank you and good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. Members of the audience and council, of course, will recognize a slight change of our procedures from previous times. Since our last meeting, the Supreme Court of Canada has said that prayers are unconstitutional at councils across the country, and of course we will abide by that ruling, and we no longer have a prayer at this council. I raise the issue in this way to juxtapose some of the public commentary that the House of Commons and legislatures are exempt from this ruling. They are governed by privilege, and therefore they are exempt. But we, of course, have no choice, whether we like it or not. We are going to proceed by upholding the law. There will not be a prayer at council in the future. We may at some point talk about how we begin the tone of discussion at council, but that is for another time in another council meeting. So I'd like to begin with a couple of points here. We have the Mayor's Poetry Challenge, and if I could have Gerald Hill and his group come forward, I want to just have a statement and have our poetry start this month. So before we begin, it's my distinct honor to introduce Gerald Hill. Gerald has kindly agreed to represent the city in the 2015 Mayor's Poetry Challenge. This is an initiative that was started 3 years ago right here in Regina with the help of U of R's Bruce Rice, who's also here. The aim is to celebrate National Poetry Month and UNESCO's World Poetry Day, and to showcase local artists in cities across Canada. Gerald Hill is one of poet Bruce's recommended to us. Gerald is one of our most celebrated local poets, having won 2 Saskatchewan Book Awards and a second prize for poetry in the 2010 CBC Literary Awards. A lifelong Southern Saskatchewan resident, Gerald teaches English and creative writing at Luther College at the U of R. And his appearance here is truly fitting. Earlier this month, he launched his 7th book. Hillsdale book is all about Regina's Hillsdale neighborhood. I'd like to call on Gerald Hill to come forward and read some poetry from his latest selections. Gerald, please come forward. Right there, if you press the button in front of you there.
Thank you for the invitation to be here this evening. So the book is called Hillsdale Book, and it's set in Hillsdale, Regina. I must say, when I submitted the book to the publisher, because my last name is Hill, they thought I'd invented this magical fantasy place known as Hillsdale. I said, no, that was a different Hill family that did that. So I'm going to read a couple of pieces from this book. First of all, to hearken back to controversies of the past. As you may know, at one time 25th Avenue was the southern limit of the city of Regina, and then at the time Hillsdale was reaching maximum development, the city closed 25th Avenue at Bell Street, and thereafter this area was known as the road that isn't. And of course local residents had varying opinions on that decision. So that's what this piece is about. It's essentially found in the leader post of the time. So, the road that isn't, controversial 25th Avenue, the no man's land of 2 fighting factions of Regina's residential subdivision, Hillsdale. City Council put up the barricade at the Bell Street intersection Friday. We had to close the avenue because to us it no longer existed, said City Engineer Henry Patterson. The people on McNabb were jubilant. That dusty avenue is a speedway and a danger to our children who play in backyards which back on to 25th, they claimed, to which the residents of Bell spoke of the danger to their own children from traffic now diverted through their streets. We bought land here because we thought it would be quiet and safe for children, they said. With 25th Avenue closed, now trucks and cars are speeding up our brand new street. Despite the barricade and road closed sign, a well-worn track has already been made around the southern end of the roadblock. This verbal warfare that has broken out will not, without a fight, come to an end. So said the Leader Post back in the late 1950s. Just one other piece I'll present to you from Hillsdale book. This is called Anderson Street Piece Eulogy. And as you'll hear, it refers to the fact that in the traditional sense, these suburbs of Regina were in the daytime a women's kind of place, the men leaving to work elsewhere. So, I salute our mom in those daytime hours in the city after dry years and war years and small town years. Here was a new house, the first she and Dad ever owned, beige, split level, nothing around but mud. I salute our mom in those daytime hours, in her picture window, bedrooms, 4, bathrooms, 2, L-shaped living room, rumpus room, and a new washer dryer. It must have been quiet with Dad at work, us kids at school. I salute our mom in those daytime hours. We rushed home at noon for lunch, and Dad lay down for a snooze, and we all rushed off, leaving Mum the housework and shopping, the Thursday afternoons at the rink. I salute our mum in those daytime hours. After school, we'd practice our piano and horn to play I Left My Heart in San Francisco, and Mum from the kitchen would say, I like that one. I salute our mum in those daytime hours we always came home to. Thank you all very much for listening.
Mr. Harrell, thank you very much for that. That was excellent. Appreciate that very much. We'll move on to our next, before we get to the actual agenda, very pleased and proud to have Councillor Hinks back with us once again, and he would like to say a few words. Councillor Hinks.
Thank you, Your Worship. I thought I should explain myself, where I've been, and first off, I want to say I'm overwhelmed and humbled by the amount of support that I've had from friends and family, City Council, and especially Councillor Bryce looking after my stuff for me, and the administration, and all the kind words you've sent to me. And I also want to explain a little bit about where I was. On February 16th, I had surgery in Calgary, and when I recovered from that, after the surgery, they got most of the cancer, but they discovered some more cancer in me that they couldn't get to. So their diagnosis was just chemo, and I've had too much chemo, but I'm back on it again as of today. But I went to Houston, Texas, and got some really good advice down there and some solutions to it. And everybody was wonderful down there, and it's a wonderful place. It's called the MD Anderson Cancer Center, and I'm going to take chemo here for 3 months, as well as another drug that the U.S. has suggested. And on July 22nd, I have an appointment back down there. And the other news is I feel great. I'm down a lot of pounds, which is probably a good thing. So that's my explanation about where I've been, and I'll be back and be it as much as I can as I go through this chemo. Thank you.
Councillor Hinks, you're the toughest guy I know. Absolutely. Councillor Bryce.
Thanks. We're happy to have you back, Councillor Hinks. I'd like to move the agenda with the additions and changes from the clerk's office.
Thank you for that. A seconder for that, please. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes from the March 23rd meeting, Councillor O'Donnell.
Your Worship, I'd like to move the minutes from the 23rd but be approved, but with a minor revision to correct an administrative error. I'll go through this if you want first, and then seek a seconder, specifically at CR 1529. One, respecting the citizen nominees to the Regina Airport Authority be revised to reflect that the terms of office for Leslie Sizz and Sean McEachran be for a 3-year term ending April 2018. By way of explanation, this correction will bring the record and the associated appointments in line with what was reflected in the public advertising for the vacancies, as well as the requirements of the Regina Airport Authority.
A seconder for that, please. Councillor Young. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll go to delegations, public notices, and bylaws, reports. CR 15-33, this is a partial road closure.
Your Worship, if I
Councillor
may,
Bell.
I declare conflict. I have an association with the company.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor
Thank you.
Bandera. We'll wait for you to leave the room. Councillor Donald.
Thank you. From Planning Commission, this is an application for a partial road closure, the portion of Fifth Avenue adjacent to 1175 Fifth Avenue and 1120 Osler Street. You have the information in front of you, and basically what this is a small piece of property. We had previously agreed to a change for the car dealership that's along there. This would solidify the property for their purposes, and we would recommend approval.
Okay, I'd like a seconder for that, please, if I could. Okay, Councillor Hinks. Any discussion or debate on this issue? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor O'Donnell, a bylaw amendment?
Thank you again. So this is an application for a zoning bylaw amendment, a rezoning from highway commercial to MAC at 3217 Eastgate Avenue. As you read in your report, it simply allows some flexibility for the proponent here to build or change whatever is there. There's more availability. And so we would also seek concurrence, and I seek a seconder for the motion, please.
Seconder for that one, please. Okay, Councillor Hinks seconds it. Just wait for Councillor Bandera. We're back on report 34, which is a partial lane closure, or, sorry, a bylaw amendment. Any discussions on that report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Report 35. This is the partial lane closure. Councillor O'Donnell.
So this is an amended application for partial lane closure, all portions of road right-of-ways within the lands commonly known as the Beaudry lands. And what happened here was that we had actually closed a number of these previously, but when the province took a look at it, they had made an application for our community to also change a couple of more, and that's really what this is another housekeeping right-of-way. So if I could have a seconder, we would also seek concurrence.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Young. Any discussion on the report? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. This parcel land is quite close to the airport. I'm just wondering if there could be an explanation from administration, what we might expect on this land at some point in the future. Thanks.
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, a comprehensive detailed planning exercise will have to be done to look at how the lands will be developed, and that will balance the needs of the airport so that they're compatible uses. So in the future, we'll be going through that exercise with the landowner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move on to delegations. Mr. Brian Black. If you could come forward and tell us who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions after. Yes.
Which one? There it is. Mayor Fougere and City Councilors, I'm speaking today to the proposed amendment to the zoning bylaw respecting parking in front yards in residential areas. I believe this is a positive amendment to the bylaw since our residential neighborhoods have been negatively scarred with the proliferation of vehicles parking in front yards and side yards on corner lots. Frequently, these vehicles are parking on surfaces that are not suited for heavy vehicles, and as a result, leave deep, muddy ruts that affect the desired beauty of our community. Reading through the information that I received from the city, I noticed that there's no mention of side yard parking on corner lots. The front yard of a residential lot is the area of a lot that is taxed and has specific limits on its development. My discussion with city officials on this topic in the past allowed me to discover that side yards of corner lots are not specifically controlled in the zoning bylaw in the same fashion. Frequently, homeowners will develop these side yards into their main use areas for access into their homes and garages. I believe that an amendment should be made to this current amendment that clearly outlines the limits of parking in the side yards of corner lots. There are numerous side yard parking areas all over the city, and they quite often have oversized driveways. As a result, there is reduced parking areas on the streets. In numerous cases, there is no permanent type of parking surface such as concrete or asphalt, and the yard surface is rutted and allows erosion of soil, gravel, and other loose material onto the street. Another negative impact of this added parking space is that the homeowner often uses it as a long-term storage spot for old vehicles and equipment that affects the residential character of our community. The front yard and side yard on corner lots share similarities in that they are viewed from the street, and anything that they're used for is evident and affects the surrounding community. One of the major reasons that was given by the city for amending this bylaw was that they want to mitigate the visual and functional impact of vehicle parking. Also, it was mentioned that they want to restrict the amount of driveway crossings, which effectively removes public parking stalls from the street. Not controlling side yard parking on these corner lots will not completely deal with this issue. In conclusion, my suggestion is to amend this bylaw so that it also defines and includes side yard parking on corner lots to realize the desired improvements that are being done for front yard parking. I'm submitting this on behalf of the Whitmore Park Community Association. I'm the vice president of that association.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Black, for your presentation. Maybe questions? Councillor Young?
Thank you for coming forward, Mr. Black.
You're welcome.
Sorry, it's not executive committee. I have to stand up. Thank you for coming forward. And my question for you is, are you speaking about the side yards that are accessible from the driveway of the house and are sometimes paved over and used for cars?
Yeah, there's access from the street itself, and it's where there's two streets intersect is what I'm referring to as a corner lot. And frequently there's access from that area for people to park up on their yards and have the same impact that front yard parking is having in our city of Regina.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Are there questions of the delegation? There are none. You can return to the gallery now, and we'll now consider the report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll deal with the front yard parking regulations. Councillor O'Donnell.
So the report is called Administrative Amendment 14Z23, Proposed Amendments to Front Yard Parking Regulations. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder, please. Okay. Councillor Flagel. Go ahead.
Thanks very much. I'm going to ask a number of questions on this. I'll begin with, to the gentleman that was here before and to the notion that we talk about parking a lot, can I ask a little bit about a parking study and where that's at?
Ms. Horlock? Okay. Mr. Onright.
Through you, Your Worship. The parking study work is continuing. It was started once the parking study was complete. There are a number of administrative changes that were brought forward in the parking study by the consultant, and some of those are being worked on. Policy decisions are coming forward to council as they come up. That is where we're at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So, Your Worship, in terms of what's been asked here, it specifically talks about front yard parking regulations. Can I seek some clarity on that wording? Are we just talking about just front yard parking, or are we talking about vehicles in a yard? And if you don't mind, I'm going to be directing this to Chief Paulson, if it could.
Mr. Paulson.
Through Your Worship, the proposed amendments deal with parking on all aspects of the property. It restricts the parking to defined and approved parking pads, whether it's front, side, or rear yard.
Thanks. I'll follow that up with, it would be my understanding that when we receive a complaint, that we act upon that complaint, and that most people are fairly compliant when it comes to asking them to correct. And so would that be a fairly accurate statement?
Mr. Paulson?
Through Your Worship, that would be accurate, yes. Really, the bulk of our compliance efforts result in voluntary compliance with the requirements of the bylaw. The enforcement is really restricted for those very worst of offenders.
Okay, so could I then follow that up with the notion that I think what's being asked here specifically is that we need to make an amendment so that we can in fact do some enforcement. So my first thought was that most people comply, but we've come into some circumstance where it is hard to get compliance for some, I'll call it, difficult situations. So is the amendment that's being requested, the wording change, to make sure that we can in fact follow through?
Mr. Paulson?
Through your worship, that is correct. We attempted an enforcement through the courts, and our wording of our bylaw in the original form was found to be lacking. This tightens that up and provides the necessary tools for us to enforce.
Thanks. And if I could ask one more question of the chief, I would suggest to you that maybe there's some frustration on both our staff's part, who have to follow through on these things, but also in terms of the neighbors when we have worked on some processes or yards and we cannot get compliance. Would that be fair?
Mr. Paulson?
Through your worship, that would be fair and an understatement.
Thanks. So if I could, I'm going to make a comment about this. We discussed this at Planning Commission for, I think my timing was 55 minutes, if I remember correctly. And whenever we talk about parking, it starts to get very wide. So I point out to you two things. One, there is a parking study that is ongoing and that will have some repercussions for other things. But to this amendment, this is for those very difficult yard situations. I'm not sure if they're in your ward, but I have them in my ward, and they have been going on for a long time. By accepting this, we have the opportunity to clean up some of those very difficult situations with people who are not willing to comply. And I would ask for your support, please.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Are there other speakers to this report? Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Could you give me some information about Appendix 2, A2, and is Mr. Black's concern about corner lots dealt with in any of those drawings, or is this something that has to be added?
Who's going to take that one? Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, I'll start and then ask Mr. Searle to answer. The proposed amendment does deal with Mr. Black's issues in a generic way in section 4.1.2. It does state that vehicles parked on site shall be only parked in approved parking spaces or in a legal driveway leading up to a garage, carport, or legal parking pad located on site. So we would look at how the side yards are being dealt with, but I might ask that Mr. Searle, if he has anything else to add with respect to the question.
Okay. Mr. Searle?
Your Worship, not much more to add to what Ms. Howerluck and Mr. Polson have provided. Although not specifically identified in Appendix A, a corner lot example, is correct that parking must occur on legally defined driveways, and if it's occurring elsewhere on landscape portions of the property where ruts are being caused and things like that, that would not be permissible.
So, so my next question is, if you drive around and look at most of the neighborhoods, at least in my area, there are many people that have taken the landscaping out next to the driveway and garage and put gravel, and some of them have concrete pads. And I believe some of them may have been given permits by the city. Is that possible? And would this change what the city would do with regard to permits for parking pads beyond the driveway?
Ms. Howerluck?
Through your worship, again, I'll start and then perhaps I'll pass it to Mr. Searle. There is legally non-conforming situations where parking regulations have changed over the years, so there will be situations where there is sites that were permitted in the past and now don't conform to the bylaw, and those are legally non-conforming so they can stay in existence. It's when we're looking at new situations or enforcement actions on newly created. So I might turn it over to Mr. Searle to add a little bit more with respect to how we deal with those situations.
Mr. Searle, do you have anything to add?
Not much more to add, Your Worship, other than there is a process to apply for a driveway crossing. Those are evaluated on a case-by-case basis to ensure compliance with the bylaw in terms of location on the property and so forth.
So then some of them might have side pads that have been approved by the city. And so I'm hearing that going forward that if anyone puts them in and they're not approved by the city, that they would then be non-conforming to the bylaw. Is that correct?
Mr. Searle?
Your Worship, that would be correct. I would indicate that, reiterate that there is a process to get the crossing, and that those are reviewed on a case-by-case basis to ensure compliance.
So if there are some of these pads and they haven't been put there with a city permit, then they would be open to being fined or having to be changed or some kind of compliance enforcement. Is that correct?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, there would be a process that we would go through, and perhaps Mr. Polson could go through how the enforcement side of a request to look into a complaint would go through the process.
Okay.
Chief Polson, do you want to add to that?
Through your worship, we would take them on a case-by-case basis. If there's an existing pad that looks like it's been there for some period of time, we would work with other city officials to determine the history on it. If it was crossing a landscape area, if there's no obvious curb cuts, if they're parking on grass and gravel and obviously temporary stuff, we would write them up and they would be able to take it through processes, including the appeals.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Other speakers on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Get that hand up quicker. Go ahead. Councilor Murray, go ahead.
Just so I can be clear on it, because again, I don't sit on the committee, so this is my first opportunity to have some discussion around it. But if there is an existing concrete pad, so over the years, 10 years ago, somebody widened their driveway by 2 or 3 feet so they could accommodate a sidewalk beside their vehicles, that's acceptable? I mean, it still goes to the proper curb, that still has, correct? They're not jumping the curb.
Mr. Searle?
Your Worship, as indicated, each case is viewed on its own individual merits on a case-by-case basis. Based on what Councillor Murray has described, it would all depend on what the purpose and intent of that space is. If it's a walkway, that's permissible. If it's intended to accommodate additional vehicles, it may not be permissible.
So then what would be you get a ticket and you're told, no, you can't do that, so you're not allowed to park there anymore, but you have to take out the concrete and put it back to grass or put it back to whatever. I'm just thinking that we could open up a really significant issue for some people, and there's a lot of people who have put new driveways in that may not be exactly where they were before.
Mr. Searle?
Through your worship, frankly, we're not terribly interested in folks that got nice, neat yards with the little additional concrete. What we're really interested in is those folks that are chewing up our boulevards, destroying front yards, parking dozens of vehicles on residential lots and things like that. So if your property doesn't look like that, we're probably not terribly interested in you.
Okay, no, and I appreciate that. Again, it's just making sure that the bylaws, Your Worship, have to be uniformly distributed. We have to use the same law no matter where it is. So if you're in one neighborhood where it's common to jump the curb and park in front of the house so you don't have to use a long extension cord to plug it in, that's a different story than somebody who's obviously invested $35,000 or $40,000 in a brand new paved driveway or a concrete driveway. So I just want to make sure that we're not setting ourselves up to get into a situation where it can become very difficult. Thanks, Your Worship.
Good point. Councilor Flegel.
Thanks. I just want to clarify. I sat on planning. You're right, 55 minutes. We talked about this. We're not changing the bylaw. The bylaw is already there. This is just going to put teeth into the hands of the officers that go out there and enforce the bylaws that are all in place. So if you're a driveway guy, poured that concrete driveway under the rules, it's good. But we're not changing the bylaw. We're just adding a few words to make it more for these guys to go out and ladies and gentlemen to go out and do their job, because we've had situations where legally they go to court and they lose because they can't enforce it. This will allow them to enforce it. Simple as that. Thank you.
We've had some very high-profile problems with front yard parking that have we have no teeth, can enforce, and they get away with it. So this is to fix that. So. Okay. You want to close debate, Councillor O'Donnell? Go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thanks. I want to highlight two things that you've heard today. One is about a parking study. So when all that information comes back, you have a chance to debate all of the nuances of things that involve parking. The teeth of this matter here is, as Chief Paulson just said, this is for those extreme cases, those very, very difficult cases that are impacting neighborhoods in great quantities because of the amount of vehicles that are parked or the care and concern of that's going on. We just need to have some change to what's already in a bylaw, what's there, to make sure that we can, in fact, in some cases, unfortunately, prosecute. And again, I ask for your support.
Councillor O'Donnell's closed debate, so there's no further debate on the issue. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to application for road closure for the bypass route. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. So this is an application for road closure, road right-of-ways intersecting the future bypass route. If I could have a seconder, I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you. So you'll have a huge, long list of closures. Only one of them was an actual, where we're actually closing a real road. And if you would note in the report that that has been amended so that that can be handled. And the rest of them are things that appear on a map, appears as right-of-ways, but are not real streets. But if the bypass is going to be built, we must close them so that it is officially done, and secondly, transfer that property to the province. And that's what you're approving by doing this, and we would look for concurrence, please.
Thank you for that. Are there comments or questions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have bylaws now. Councillor Fraser. I guess you'll separate one.
Your Worship, I will remove myself. I declare conflict on this one. So if you
Why
can,
don't we do the remaining four? You can stay.
Sure. You want to do the first four and then I leave?
Yeah,
or
sure.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So this is a public notice of bylaws. I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaws number 2015-27, 2015-28, 2015-29, and 2015-31 be introduced and read for a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Mr. Clerk?
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has now completed its consideration of reports CR 34, 35, 36, and 37, and will now consider the related bylaws which have been publicly advertised as required by either the Cities Act or the Planning and Development Act. If there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council on any of these bylaw proposals at this time, I would ask that you identify yourself. There is no one, Your Worship.
I will call the vote on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that bylaws number 2015-27, 2015-28, 2015-29, and 2015-31 be read for a second time.
Any comments on this? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that Council hereby consent to the bylaws number 2015-27, 2015-28, 2015-29, and 2015-31 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hinks, that bylaws number 2015-27, 2015-28, 2015-29, and 2015-31 be read for a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Frendura?
Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that, I move, seconded by Councillor Murray, that bylaw number 2015-26 be introduced and read for a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has completed its consideration of Report CR 1533 respecting the partial road closure on Fifth Avenue, and it will now consider the related bylaw which has been publicly advertised as required by the Cities Act. If there's anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council at this time on the proposed bylaw amendment, I would ask that you identify yourself at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the vote on the first reading. All those in favor?
Okay. Good point. Okay.
Good point.
So
someone else to move it down. Councillor Young, perhaps?
Okay. Then I'll start again. I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce. Sorry. that bylaw number 2015-26 be introduced and read for a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaw number 2015-26 be read for a second time.
Any comments on the report, the bylaw? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that council hereby consent to bylaw number 2015-26 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Donald, that bylaw number 2015-26 be read for a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. So we can perhaps get Councilor Fedora back. We'll move on to delegations, communications, bylaws, and related reports. We have Jonathan Pradnick. Can you come forward, please? And your person with you, could you identify yourself, who you represent? You have 5 minutes for your presentation as well. Can you turn the microphone on? Ron? Just there you go.
My name is Jonathan Pradnick, and I believe you know my fellow Bike Regina Board of Director member, Sarah Maria Dobis. We don't feel it's necessary to take up a lot of your time today, but since it's a bicycle-related item, here we are. We're here today to restate Bike Regina's position that the bicycle license program and the traffic bylaw should be repealed. The report before council supports the anecdotal information from conversations that we have had with city administration and Regina Police that the program does not prevent bicycle theft, and a limited number of bikes are returned via the licensing program. Therefore, our view is that the mandatory bicycle license bylaw is ineffective, and since it is for the most part not achieved its purpose, returning lost or stolen bikes, that it should be repealed. Furthermore, the bike license bylaw constitutes a small but a financial barrier for those who choose or are obliged to ride a bike for financial reasons, as they either pay a license fee or risk paying a fine. Choosing to ride a bicycle for recreation or as a means of transportation should not be made more complicated than it needs to be. Finally, having followed some of the public reaction to the proposed amendment in the media in the past few weeks, it has become apparent that many people misunderstood the program to be about teaching cyclists proper operation on roads. We would encourage the city to lobby with SGI with us to include improved instruction to drivers on how to share the road with cyclists so all the roads become safer for everyone, car drivers and cyclists alike. We are encouraged by the direction given by the Public Works Committee and are hopeful that City Council will support their recommendation to repeal the mandatory bicycle license bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of the delegation? Councilor Fraser?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much for your presentation here tonight. A couple questions for you. Do you think a program like this could be effective? Like, do you know of any other examples of a registry that is implemented in a way where people actually can use it and ensure they get their bike back if it's stolen?
Something that does exist, and in fact exists in Regina, is a serial number registry. The bike shops in town, when they sell a bicycle, so new bicycles are registered, and you can also, if you're buying a second-hand bicycle, you could register the serial number online. So that helps if you want to get it back from the police if it is found as stolen. There are also there's technology that you can, like a microchip that you can put on your bike and it can be found again if stolen. But there's been studies in Australia and other locations in Canada that show that the bike licensing as a means of getting back the bicycle is ineffective.
Okay. Okay, thanks. I agree with most all of your presentation. The only thing, issue for me, when we talk about cost of this licensing being a barrier versus people having their bike stolen as being a barrier, I think there's a lot of people that don't ride a bike because they've lost their bike already, or there's a fear of losing your bike. I imagine, I don't want to guess, but there's a good chance you've had your bike stolen, either of you? Yeah, okay. So the voluntary registry, is there anything that you think we could do as a city or Bike Regina could do to help people know about that and kind of make it more effective? I mean, in essence, we're not really enforcing this law right now anyway, so somehow it is sort of a voluntary system. Is there something we can do to make that number 5% of bikes being returned, make that number grow?
Good question.
If it's a voluntary program, we'll certainly educate our members about it, just so they're aware.
Sure. Okay, thanks for that. Final note, just to say, great work, Bike Regina. There's a growing number of cyclists in the city, and you guys have really been in the heart of that, so it shows. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Hinks.
First, I'd like to thank you on the good work that you do and keeping the whole biking front and center. And I guess now that you're on TV right now, I'd like to ask you what you guys do, like as far as your activities, plans, all that sort of thing. So I just think it's a good opportunity for you to tell the public what you're all about.
Sure thing. Thank you. So Bike Regina has 3 aspects to it. We're an advocacy group, and so we present to budgets and we follow along with changes that are happening, and we respond. And we're through talking to our members, we get the opinions of cyclists in Regina. So that's the advocacy. We also do education, where there's 2 aspects of that. We're at the farmers market every other week in the summer, teaching people how to fix their own bikes, because that's a barrier for people that, you got a flat tire, you don't know what to do. Well, we're happy to show you how to fix small things on your bike. And then we also do workshops for commuting, to learn how to plan safe routes and also commute safely. We're CAN Bike certified. And the third is community development. We do monthly rides and other fun events to show people that riding is possible on the road, and it is fun and enjoyable. I think that's overall what we do.
Thank you. I have to tell you, one of your members, as you know, Lou Schwint, is a friend of mine, and he sold me a bike on the weekend, and I went for my first bike ride in 2 years, and it was totally enjoyable. And I don't know where I'm going with the question here, but he works at Western Cycle. I want to put a plug in for him. He works at Western Cycle and does a great job of selling bikes.
I think you just did that, Councillor Hinks. Any other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and I'll consider the report before us. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'd like to move item CR 15-38, amendments to the Regina traffic bylaw, if I can get a seconder.
Seconder, please, for that. Councillor Hinks.
Thank you very much. These are a miscellaneous set of amendments that are necessitated from time to time as a result of review of the traffic bylaw. There's adding of new changes. There's changes in the intent of existing bylaws to ensure that they adapt to provincial legislation and other changing conditions and public attitudes. Also, it's necessary in some cases to clarify the intent of the bylaws. The changes are outlined in Appendix 1. I'll just very briefly set them out in summary form. There are changes to bus lanes that are necessary, first of all. Secondly, there's a group of changes for metered parking regulations to reflect new parking meter symbols and wording. Thirdly, there's a further offense to deal with stopped vehicles, that is, vehicles that remain stopped in one place and need to be ticketed a second time because they haven't moved. Fourthly, there's a minor change to privileged parking permits, which clarifies that privileged parking permits aren't valid in short-term parking spaces. Fifthly, as we've heard from the delegation, there's removal of the bicycle licensing provision. Sixthly, seventhly, and eighthly deal with changes to the routing of pickup and delivery vehicles. And ninthly, this is dear to my heart, a removal of notice of violation dealing with leaving cord or cable across a public highway or sidewalk. Some years back we dealt with that issue, which requires this amendment. I just make 2 observations. The first is when Public Works dealt with the bicycle licensing removal, it was pointed out that it would no longer be necessary to have the bicycle impounding provisions. That was moved as an amendment by Public Works. The second thing, and is included here, the second thing I'd mention is with respect to privileged parking permits, Public Works has asked for a report to be brought back by the city in the fall
dealing with the numbers and conditions under which privileged parking permits are to be issued. So with those, I'd ask for approval of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Any discussion on the report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. I need clarity. I want to make sure I understand this. Probably will not come as a surprise that I'm going to read this. Schedule B, proposed amendments to, and I'll read. The second is to remove the following sections from the heavy and long combination vehicle routes area, which include Dudney Avenue between Louvain and West City limits, and then to mention some others. I'm focusing in on Dudney. Somebody tell me what this means, please.
Let's try that one. Ms. Gizmo, do you want to?
Through you, Your Worship, what this means is that these sections of roadway would no longer be permitted for those types of vehicles.
So what you're looking for, isn't it, Councillor?
Yeah, so I'm going to be real specific. So if you have a semi-truck, whether it's full of gravel or whether it's full of household goods, and you can't go, and you can't go down Dudney Avenue anymore.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, that is correct.
So I have to just keep on going.
Are
for
you
a
going to
second.
vote for this, Councillor?
I am. I may stand up here. So I just want to be clear. So first on process, if this passes in the associate, is there a bylaw that goes with this? Yeah, bylaw goes with this. So does that become effective midnight tonight or something?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, just confirm with legal, yes, it will become effective as soon as it is passed.
Good, thanks. So obviously there are some companies that have been doing this, I may say even today. How do they know that this is going to become not the norm anymore?
Through you, Your Worship, we will be informing the Trucking Association of the change. We also intend to put variable message signs up on these locations to advise motorists of the change. Following the variable message signs, there will be permanent signage, and there will be enforcement by the Regina Police Service.
So, again, specifically, I'm assuming that there'll be contact directly with the GTH and the associated companies in particular that are there.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship, we could certainly arrange that.
Perfect. So I'm not sure what else to say, gang, but please pass this. This will make some people in the west side of the city just so happy. And I want to thank everybody that did this. Thank you. And by the way, the street's getting repaired too, so thanks.
Councillor Flagel?
Thanks. I agree with rerouting, but where is it going to go?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through you, Your Worship, I'd ask Mr. Sear to help with that question.
Through Mr. Chair, the trucks will be routed south on Louvain. They'll be taking Highway 1, and they'll use the Pinky bypass to go to GTH. And it's the same reverse route applies as well.
Okay. So if they're leaving, you're saying south? Say that again. They're going where?
They'll be using Louvain to go south to access Highway 1, and then they'll use Pinky Road to access GTH.
Okay. So what about all the north traffic?
They'll be using the same reverse route. They'll be using Highway 1, access Louvain, go north to wherever they need to go.
Okay. That's once the bypass is done. Like, what about tomorrow? I don't quite get, you're saying going south on the Louvain. So if there's truck traffic going north to Highway 11 Saskatoon, where are they going from the GTH? How are they getting to Saskatoon from the GTH if they're not using Dudney Avenue?
Through Mr. Chair, they can use the ring road to access Highway 11, or they can choose to use Louvain to access Highway 11 too.
So they can still go down the Louvain, though?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But not through Dudney Avenue?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. I just wanted, because I didn't want to create, what I don't want to do is create a lot of traffic going up McCarthy Boulevard or Pinky Road to 9th Avenue North to McCarthy Boulevard or Louvain to get to Saskatoon. So we're making sure that they go a specific way. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Bryce?
I don't want to complicate this any more than it already is, but how are they actually getting out of
the GTH. When I look down Dudney all the way to the GTH and on Pinky, it's not marked for heavy road, and my computer just shut off on me again. So it's not marked for heavy trucks. So how do you actually get in and out of the GTH?
Ms. Gizmo?
I'd look at it.
Through you, Your Worship, what is shown on here is only the roads within the city boundaries. So the portion that they would use from the GTA is outside the city boundaries. So we just haven't shown it.
Okay. Sorry, my computer shut down, so I guess I'm done questioning. No, it's not.
Thank you, Councilor Price. Other comments? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks for the people that have been bringing this report forward. I agree with the vast bulk of it. A couple of things that stick out. First is just a comment or question and comment about the bus lanes being removed from downtown. I note that the working group that came up with that suggestion didn't include the transit department. Is that right? They weren't listed on who came up with that idea. Is that true?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Your Worship, that is correct.
Okay. Do we, given that it's sort of related to, I mean, taking the bus routes out of downtown Regina is somehow related to transit, I would say, is there a reason why they weren't part of that consultation?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, I'll ask Mr. Searer to answer that.
Through Mr. Worship, this recommendation came out of the downtown transportation study, is to remove the bus lanes. The current definition in the bylaws says any street which is designated as a bus lane, traffic can't drive through an intersection or drive through a street intersection. By eliminating the bus lane definition from 11th Avenue, that would allow vehicles to use the curb lane to bypass any traffic waiting to turn left at intersections.
Okay, so I appreciate that it's part of the consultant's report, and certainly we hire consultants as experts, so that's something we need to take to heart. My real concern is this: that transit offers 6.6 million rides a year. There's actually 2,600 people that commute to downtown on buses. My argument would be that probably the traffic along 11th, there's actually more people traveling in buses than there are in cars if we count people. So to put that number in perspective, 2,600 people commute to downtown on a bus every day, versus there's only 1,250 street meters downtown. So we can get into this sort of camp argument, pro car, pro bus, or whatever, but my concern is that by removing those bus lanes, it's actually going to make it worse potentially for everyone. Now, I appreciate our consultant has said otherwise, but I would like to move an amendment that if we're going to try this, that's fine, but that we might get a report back sometime in the future on how this is working to sort of revisit it. So I'll look for direction from administration, what a reasonable timeline might be for us to get a report back sort of on the broader transportation issue along 11th and 12th Avenue. Let's
see if we have a seconder for your amendment to the report. And you're asking for a report to come back
just a report
on the impact?
Yeah, on the impact, yeah.
Okay, Councilor Flagel. Discussion on the amendment, which is to have a report back on the impact of removing bus lanes on 11th Avenue.
And 12th Avenue.
And 12th Avenue. To the administration, can you give a time frame as to when you might have the report back? Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, the work or the change being brought forward won't be in effect until the fall, so transit will work with traffic before that change takes place. We would ask that we would have to the end of the first quarter in 2016 to bring a report back.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
We're clear on that, the first quarter of next year? On the amendment. Councilor Flagel.
Seeing as that last quarter and first quarter are winter, does it have a different impact in spring and summer as opposed to fall and winter for that report as being better, worse? I'm just wondering about better conditions sometimes might change. Maybe wait for the second quarter?
We'll find out.
I don't know.
Mr. Onright?
We can certainly do that. We don't see that it will impact one way or the other, whether it's winter or spring or summer.
Okay. And a Q2 would be fine by me, end of second quarter 2016.
Okay. Okay. So we're clear on the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Okay, thanks. And then just one other question. So there's a change to the privileged parking pass here that would no longer allow people with privileged parking passes to park in 15-minute zones, but we're still allowed to park in zones that are metered for 1 hour or more for up to 24 hours. Is that correct?
Mr. Ron,
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay, so there's a parking study that the city commissioned a few years ago that actually, I haven't seen it, it hasn't made it to council, but the good folks at the Leader Post have got their hands on a copy. Is this one of the suggestions in that report?
Mr. Ron,
Yes, it is.
Okay, so just a comment, I guess. I appreciate Councillor Hawkins mentioned that we'll be getting a report back on the privileged parking passes in the fall. To the extent that it's compensation for people that work for the city, if that's council or whoever it is that gets those passes, I think that's a reasonable thing. The challenge is that it totally removes us from the parking reality that other people have to face downtown. So if we're doing it as part of a compensation package, my suggestion might be that we can adjust the compensation package, versus part of that being this magic parking pass. Because, really right now, those of us with the parking pass, you go on city business somewhere, you're expecting to be there for an hour and you stay for 24 hours. I don't know. Our meetings run a long time sometimes, but it really means we can more or less park anywhere at any time. And the reality that the rest of people have to deal with parking downtown, again, we as lawmakers, which is ultimately what we're here to do, are somehow removed from that. Again, if it's a compensation issue, there's other ways we can deal with that. But to me, it just sort of keeps us out of touch with the parking reality downtown. So I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other comments? You're going to close debate? I just have a question about the Dewdney Avenue change. And I, too, receive a tremendous amount of calls and other communications about the damage done on Dewdney Avenue. So I'd just like to be clear that with the passing of the bylaw tonight, enforcement happens. Can the administration speak to how we will enforce that bylaw? Because we have a huge amount of traffic going down there. That these are large, not just delivery trucks, but these are major transfer trucks that are literally tearing that street apart. We all know that. So if we could talk for a moment about how the manner in which we will enforce and change behavior as soon as we can. Ms. Gizmo.
Your Worship, as I had stated, we are going to contact the Trucking Association to advise them of the change and give them some advice on how to change their routes and their practices, so not to use Dewdney or Gordon Road. The enforcement happens by the Regina Police Service, and they have been working in consultation with us, and will do a proactive campaign to address this very early on in the process so that people's behaviors start to change.
That's good. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Hawkins, to close debate.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I think that the questions have helped clarify the amendments that are being proposed to the traffic bylaw. I just want to make one comment. With respect to privileged parking permits, councillors do not use those permits to go shopping. Those are permits that we use to conduct the business of related to council matters, and I think they're critical in that sense. I'm looking forward to the report when it comes forward, but one thing I can confidently say to the public is that both to have helped facilitate us do public business, the parking permits are an essential part of our job. With that, I'd like to ask for acceptance of these amendments.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. He's closed debate, so there's no other speakers on this. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we go to Finance Administration, Property Tax Exemptions. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward the CR 1539, Boundary Alterations 2015 Property Tax Exemptions. So, number one, that the property tax exemptions outlined within this report be approved, and they're within the appendix. And part two, that the city solicitor be instructed to bring forward the necessary bylaw to provide for those property exemptions, which are listed in Appendix A, B, and C. Your Worship, there was some discussion at the Finance Administration Committee, and it was brought forward with the recommendation for approval.
Seconder for that, please. Okay, Councillor Hinks seconds that. So this report actually talks about the way we treat land that we annexed over the last 2 years, I guess 2 years ago now. And there's different phases to that depending upon how immediate will be the inclusion within the boundaries of the city where we'll actually be developing. Any questions or comments on the report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Just want to pick up on that point you just made. Are the people who are now new to the city of Regina since the annexation aware of this process, and have they been able to comment on this?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Bryden.
Through your worship, this is the second year of exemptions for the annexed properties, and they were all communicated with last year as to what the process was and the staging of each year of the annexations.
Thank you. And I thought that was the case. I seem to remember at the time we not only debated this, but did the signing, we talked about this. So my follow-up question to that is, was there a general understanding that this was a fair process generally?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Bryden as she deals with the ratepayers.
Through you, Mr. Worship. Yes, generally it has been accepted as a fair and equitable process.
Thank you. So one more follow-up to this. When we are doing this, was there also a conversation about city services to some of these property and how that would fall in line? So I'm thinking more of water if they didn't have water or those types of things. So you fill me in on that process, please.
Ms. Horlock? Ms. Horlock, do you want to take that?
Through your worship, as we move forward with servicing the different lands, we did notify the ratepayers that as services are extended, we would be putting their properties onto the city services as we extend services out. So that was part of the reflection of some of the exemptions and how it was mitigated and how we put the taxes into place over the last 5 years is because some properties are going to receive services quicker than outside of the 300,000 population.
Right, and again, so if you don't mind, did that make sense to them? And was it a generally accepted notion?
To your worship, during the process, it seemed very reasonable to the people that we were dealing with. We didn't, as I recall, get any major complaints about the process. I think they felt it was fair, and that for the properties that were outside of the 300,000 population, it was recommended that we give them a 15-year phase-in.
So this makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious, though, did anybody say, no matter where they live, in whatever area, I really don't want city services? Did anybody say that? Don't bother bringing that stuff to me.
Ms. Horlock?
To your worship, no, I don't recall anybody saying that.
Okay, so, your worship, I'm asking these questions for a couple of reasons, and one of them is for understanding, but two, I'm sitting as part of SUMA with a boundary alteration committee with SARM. I think this is very appropriate information. I'll be bringing that to the table tomorrow.
Thank you for that, Councilor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Members will recall that when we annexed the land from Arma-Sherwood, which came into force January 1st of 2014, this report, this idea of compensation and annexation, how we apply taxation, was part of public consultation. And all the landowners were consulted and agreed to that when we brought it forward. So nothing new here, but this is our annual exemption that we have before us. So this report will come to us every year. Other speakers on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor Murray?
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 1540. These are recommendations from the Finance Administration Committee on the annual property tax exemptions for 2015. And there's two parts, Your Worship, that City Council approved the property tax exemptions outlined in Appendix A, and the Part 2 that the City Solicitor be instructed to bring forward the necessary bylaw to provide for the property tax exemptions which are listed there. Your Worship, the recommendations coming from Finance Administration were for approval. Thanks.
Thank you for that. A seconder for this? Councilor Hinks. Questions or comments? Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I note some of the exemptions are for condominiums. Can someone just explain what qualifies them for tax exemption? Thanks.
So who wants to take that? Ms. Horlock.
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Ms. Bryden.
Ms. Bryden?
Through you, Your Worship. Several of those condominiums were some of the original condominium developments that happened in the city, and some of the land within the developments are are city-owned, but they're still open for public use. And so they're within the condominium development, but they're open for public use, and so we exempt those sections. They're like walkways and things like that.
Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to a communication from Mr. Barr on tax exemption in school division and property tax bylaw. Could I have a mover for that, please? Councilor Bryce, a seconder. Councilor Hinks, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move on to Finance Administration, Regina property tax bylaw, school division property tax. That would be you, Mr. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I bring forward CR 1541, and this would be the Regina property tax bylaw 2015 and school division property tax. So there are three parts, Your Worship, that came recommended from Finance Administration. Number one, that City Council approve the following mill rate factors for 2015. A 0.87880 for residential and multifamily, a 1.32901 for commercial and industrial, a 0.68359 for golf courses, 1.32901 for resource, and also the same 1.32901 for agriculture. Your Worship, there's a second part that the city solicitor be instructed to prepare the necessary bylaws for consideration by council for tonight, and include the municipal mill rate for other taxing authorities. Mill rates, mill rate factors, and business improvement districts. Mill rates are outlined within this report. There was, Your Worship, a request by the Royal Regina Golf Club to have the mill rate factor of the golf course subclass reduced from 65 to 30%. The mill rate factor for the commercial class was denied. Your Worship, that's the recommendations coming from Finance.
Thank you for that. A seconder for that, please. Councilor Hinks. Discussion on this. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Now we have bylaws.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, I move, seconded by Councilor Murray, that bylaws number 2015-13, 2015-14, 2015-23, 2015-30, and 2015-32 be introduced and read for a first time.
I have 30 here as well. Did you get 30?
I did say, if
say-
I didn't, please include in that list 2015-30.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councilor Fundura, that bylaws number 2015-13, 2015-14, 2015-23, 2015-30, and 2015-32 be read a second time.
Any comments on this? I have one. To the administration, some media reports are speaking of no mill rate increase for, I believe, school boards, and a 4.13% mill rate increase for the city. That is not, just want to be clear here, it's confirming the administration, what we passed for the City Council for the residential and multifamily is a 3.9% increase in 2015, not 4.13. Just want to confirm that publicly for the record. Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of council, that's correct. Council passed the tax change that you just described, Your Worship. The effect on mill rates varies in the context of the assessment rule. Mm-hmm. So there is a difference, but for purposes of the average property taxpayer, the change in taxes would reflect those changes council made when it decided the budget in December.
Thank you for that. I'll call the question second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councilor Young, that council hereby consent to bylaws number 2015-13, 2015-14, 2015-23, 2015-30, and 2015-32 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councilor Bryce, that bylaws number 2015-13, 2015-14, 2015-23, 2015-30, and 2015-32 be read for a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Now move on to delegations, communications, and related reports. We have a delegation, Sandy Doran. If You can identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Members of City Council and Mayor Forget. My name is Sandy Dorn, Executive Director with the Warehouse Business Improvement District. In 2003, the Regina Old Warehouse District was granted approval to become a business improvement district under the Cities Act and continues to see change and new business coming into the area. Significance awareness of and strong interest in the 80 block area has been heightened by the Regina Centre Crossing development, Dooney Avenue construction, and a variety of businesses that have opened. The approval by City Council to move forward with the public investment development of CP Freight Facility and Regina Revitalization Project has added to the awareness. The district is becoming a vibrant and prosperous area located adjacent to downtown but equally in the heart of the city. It is an enhancement to our downtown, housing the primary entertainment strip on Dooney Avenue, but equally important, housing over 550 businesses located here. Many of those businesses are small, family-owned and operated, giving the area unique character and flavor it is known for. Over 29 heritage warehouse built in the city style of Chicago School of Architecture remain in the district today. With many converted to retail outlets, condominium projects, this repurposing ensures our heritage is not lost and also provides new life for these rock-solid structures that reflect our past. It will be important in the long term to ensure property owners understand the heritage value of their properties as we prepare for the redevelopment coming into the district. The Warehouse District Board of Directors approved the 2015 budget on March 17, 2015, proposing to maintain the mill rate of .7588 from the previous year. This would allow us to continue with expenditures towards street furniture, the linear park planned along Broad Street at 7th Avenue in partnership with the Saskatchewan Rough Riders and Colliers, cleanup of Broad Street underpass, walkway, and murals of our Ghosting Mural project, and event marketing, all funded under this levy amount. There is excitement in the district in anticipation of change and great things coming in the area in the next few years. The Warehouse Business District Improvement welcomes the change and challenges growth and development. Thank you, and I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions? Councillor Fraser.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks so much for your presentation, for your good work. Certainly a lot happening in the Warehouse District these days. If you could guess what it'll be like in another 10 years, what do you predict?
That's a good question. Obviously, hopefully continue to be vibrant with more residents being built, more businesses moving into the area. Currently, there's a lot of locally owned businesses, so we hope that trend continues and that there are more locally owned businesses in there, as well as places, and also walkability and being able to walk from location to location, having the safety of the residents, as well as a lot of business in different areas for them to visit and maintain in the area.
Okay, great. Yeah. So just to say, thanks for your presentation.
Thank you.
It's really an exciting part of the city, and it's good to have a bid there. So
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions? You can return to the gallery. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll now consider the report on the budget for the Warehouse Improvement District. Councillor Murray.
Thanks very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Ms. Dorn, for coming forward for us. It is exciting. The Warehouse District is very vibrant, and there's a tremendous amount going on, and of course, partnering with downtown and being able to work together with all of our businesses, it is very good times. Your Worship, I'm rising to bring forward CR 1542, the Regina Warehouse Business Improvement District 2015 budget. Recommendations for approval coming from Finance Administration were two parts. One, that City Council approve the bids detailed budget as seen in Appendix A, and Part 2, the City Council approve the proposed 2015 levy for the Regina Warehouse Business Improvement District of 0.7588 mils to be applied to the current commercial property within the Warehouse Improvement District, Your Worship. And so if I can have a seconder.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Hawkins.
Thanks, Councillor Hawkins. It is exciting times. The Warehouse District has morphed over the last decade that I've been fortunate to be involved, albeit I'm not a very good attendee because I seem to sit on too many committees and I get backed up and can't always attend. But the dedication and the commitment from the volunteers who have come forward and the staff that have been working through the work that they do at the bid is tremendous, and they're encouraging that growth and development within our community to see the whole Dooney Strip continue to grow, and then of course opposite to that, the land that we'll see developing over the next few years. And I think Councillor Fraser may have been alluding to that. There is a real excitement in the air. So, Your Worship, I'm happy to bring forward this budget. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Are there any comments on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to our next delegation, Wanda Silzer. If you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards. There's a button that should be marked as on-off. There you go.
Okay, I think I've got it now. Mayor Frugere, members of Regina City Council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to address Council this evening. My name is Wanda Silzer, and I represent West Cathedral area in regards to the Edward Street sewer and drainage issues. I attended the Public Works Committee meeting at the Cathedral Area Community Center on April 21st to learn and understand the options presented by the Public Works Department for sewer and drainage issues within our area. I would like to thank the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee and the Public Works employees that attended this event. Now that I better understand the proposed solutions to the drainage issues, I am still concerned that our issues will be redirected to other homeowners, either in our area or to the part of the CPR Annex west of Louvain, as they also experience the same issues, as both areas are served by the Wascana Trunk. None of these options address that. My preference would have been to see sanitary option number 4, which is a more workable solution to the wastewater mains in our area, but I realize that money to fix things is always the issue. I and the area residents who attended the meeting are in agreement with the options recommended by the Public Works Department. Former Councillor Fred Clipson's letter will confirm this as well. The other issue I think will require the city's ongoing supervision is a requirement in the contractual agreement between the city and the owner of the development at 2220 Edward Street. That condition is when their on-site septic storage reaches 50%, the owner must have a septic pumping service remove the sewage. Apparently, the system works on an alarm system. The intent is to ensure that the potential for sewer backup will not adversely affect the surrounding neighbors. As this is clear from the report and the accepted fix for our sewer drainage issues, we will have no sewer service during storm events. Personally, I think this is ludicrous, and in order to accommodate a high-density development in the Wascana Creek floodplain, that this development has to install a sewage holding tank with an alarm so the sewage doesn't add to a long-known sewer drainage issue. Such a system may be appropriate for a remote area, but this is Regina, the capital city of the province of Saskatchewan, and not a farm or cabin where this would be acceptable. We all pay our monthly sewer and water bills, and to be denied service whenever there's a storm event, or possibly more, often doesn't seem fair. How are residents in our area to go without service for days at a time? I believe the city has a responsibility to provide residents with a discount for our sewer service. In my opinion, I believe the contractual agreement regarding the need to pump out the sewage of the septic storage tank at 2220 Edward Street presents a potential liability for the city, but I will leave that with others to consider. Residents in this area have all paid the consequences of the city's disregard for a neighborhood plan and the city's building bylaw, which made it clear that there should be no more development in this area. I am thankful that something is finally being done, but it still does not provide me with any peace of mind as a homeowner. The last question I have is, why are we as taxpayers paying for the $150,000 worth of drainage improvements when it was in the original site drawing of the development, which I have with me today? My taxes have increased, and yet we are receiving less than acceptable service for which we are paying. I also have documentation on 2 other backflow valves that will work better in situations like ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Silzer, for your presentation. Are there any questions of the delegation? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Mrs. Silzer.
Given what you heard at that public meeting and the work that's going to be done, do you feel like you have experienced a lot of flooding and back up in your basement many times? Do you feel like you'll get some relief from that while this goes into place?
I think the only relief that's going to be provided for me personally is to the backflow valve that I have, because I've had to install a gate valve besides that. So it will take the pressure off the backflow valve, but I still won't have service. And it's not only me that won't have service now, it's all of us that won't have service.
During a storm?
During a storm event.
Okay.
So it's affecting like 3 to 4 blocks worth of residences now, as opposed to just...
How often does that type of storm or that happen during a year period, for instance?
Pretty much anytime it rains hard, like any decent rain, this is what's occurring. There's not a lot of drainage in our area, and what drainage we do have doesn't work. And on top of that, where that development is, the city often has to put pumps there and drain the water from the end of Edward Street into a sewer drain. And when that pump is going, my sewer surcharges. When that pump runs out of gas, I stop surcharging.
So this is going to correct some of the problem, but it's not going to correct the whole problem for you?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Other questions? Councillor Fraser?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks for your presentation and through your persistence through all this. It's been a long conversation. I'm glad to see it where it is here tonight. Do you have a timeline in mind? I mean, have you been told through this kind of when you would expect these changes, if this passes tonight, when they would happen?
I was told that the isolation valves would go in probably right away.
Okay.
The improvements to Edward Street would be 2016 with the storage tank and lift station. As far as the drainage to the 2220 Edward site, I'm not actually sure when that would happen.
Okay. Okay, and do you have any questions for administration?
Well, I had a few there. The drainage that is in this proposal is $150,000 worth of drainage, but yet in the original site services map that I have from the developer, most of that was included in this site map. So I'm just wondering why, as taxpayers, we're paying for it now and not the developer.
Surface drainage we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks, and thanks for bringing this forward again. If I remember correctly, last fall, when we were just a year ago, whenever we discussed this, you mentioned that no backflow valves worked properly.
You bet.
So now you've found a couple that will? Is that what you're...
I've found better potential
Okay.
fixes, like for backflow valves. Like, none of those are meant to be under pressure.
Yes.
And that's the biggest concern. So the isolation valves will take the pressure off those. But there have, like with technology, like everything, you know, there's been a couple of improvements and new ones that have come out since then.
Mm-hmm. Okay. The city has told you 2016 would be the fixed date to have this done. Have they assured you that it will fix the problem? Or is it sort of do you feel it's a Band-Aid effect? Or what's your opinion on them telling you that they're going to do the plumbing, they're going to do all the infrastructure work to have it done in 2016? Are you not comfortable with what they've said and to relieve the problem?
Ideally, I'd like to see that other option. I think it was number 4. Yeah, sanitary option number 4, which would basically dig up our whole street and, a number of streets and regrade the sewer. But, you know, money is an issue, and like the other option, the recommended one, is it will help, but I don't know that it'll fix anything. We still won't have sewer, so in a storm event, none of us will have sewer. So to me, it doesn't really fix anything.
Okay. And thanks for that. One other thing through Mr. Mayor is that I know you talked about the alarm and the 50% fill. Is that not just a temporary until 2016? You're saying that that's a permanent? We're going to ask that question in Min, and we want to know the answer, but it's not just a temporary fix until 2016's completion? Is that your understanding or not?
No, that's a permanent thing.
Okay. Okay. That's what I want to know. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagle. Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. Thank you for coming forward. For those who haven't heard from you before, can you tell us about your insurance company and what all has happened in the last couple of years and your ability to get insurance and the cost it's been to you so far?
Well, luckily I had flood and sewer backup coverage that I had to use 3 times in 2 years. One of the floods, my basement was already ripped out, so it didn't really matter. But I can't get insurance anymore. Nobody will insure me. I did try to get some coverage a couple of years later, and my rates quadrupled if I wanted that same coverage. And then I would have had about a $10,000 or $15,000 deductible, and it's just, financially, it's just not worth it. A lot of us are in the same situation. A lot of insurance companies are telling us all, because it's not our houses that are the problem, because it's a city sewer problem, they'll just walk away from us, basically. Or they'll say they'll cover us, but a $10,000 or $15,000 deductible. And I mean, in some places, well, that's a lot of money. And to even have insurance for that, it doesn't even pay.
Thank you very much for coming forward again this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you. You can return to the gallery, and we will look at our report. Actually, you have a communication from Fred Klipsch.
Your Worship, I'll move the recommended disposition of the communication.
Seconder for that, please. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we'll go to the report. This is Edward Street Sewer and Drainage Update. Councillor Hawkins.
Your Worship, I'd like to move CR 1543. It's a recommendation from the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. I'll just outline the recommendation, and then if I could ask for a seconder, yes. I'd appreciate that. That $1.5 million be transferred from the General Utility Reserve to the capital account to allow for the detailed design and construction of the following upgrades, and there are 3, and it's helpful to keep these in mind. A, installation of isolation valves on the sanitary mains of Edward Street, Pasqua Street, and Wascana Street. That's option 1. B, installation of new pump station, storage, and underground sanitary mains to accommodate wastewater flows during wet weather events. And C, upgrades to the overland flow storm system to allow stormwater to enter Wascana Creek, storm sewer option number 1.
Seconder for that, please. Councillor Pendergade's hand up first.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'd like to take a few minutes with this because it's complicated and because we as a council have been dealing with this almost since our first meeting. I have some questions that I'd like to ask the administration. First of all, I'd ask the administration to confirm the timelines for when the three aspects of the work are to be done.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, Mr. Doney will be able to provide those dates.
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, the 3 different stages of work will occur as follows. So, number 1, the sanitary isolation valves will occur this summer. Number 2, the pump station storage and underground work construction is expected to occur in 2016. And C, the overland flow upgrades is expected to occur this summer.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Second question is, we've heard from the delegation and read in the report that during a storm event, there may be a period of time in which the houses affected are unable to use their sewer system. I'm wondering if the administration can explain that and can explain how likely it is or how long it is that people are likely to be without their sewer system during a storm event.
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, as mentioned, this is a complicated matter, but for item number 1, isolation valves, if those go in this summer residents will be in a similar situation as they have been in. However, the pressure will be taken off of those households' check valves, and so they will be without service depending on the storm event. But last summer we had an event that was upwards of 24 to 48 hours. However, next summer when the construction happens at the pump station and the underground mains, we do not expect residents in this area to be without wastewater service.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I understand the answer, in the current system, it could be 24 to 48 hours, but once improvements are made, there may not be any effect at all. Am I correct in my understanding?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, that is correct. The one caveat I'll put is the storms of tomorrow are bigger than the storms of yesterday, but we do expect that the upgrades will improve to significant improvement level service.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. My final question for the administration before I make my comments is, can you give us some kind of idea of how effective, if all three of these aspects are adopted, how effective the improvement will be, recognizing that perfection is never likely and that there are always unforeseen events? How effective do you see these improvements being for these residents?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, we expect this improvement completed at the end of 2016 to be very effective for the residents in this very isolated area. Like mentioned, there's always mechanical and other events that can happen, but in general we expect this solution to be effective.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. The answers were very helpful. I just want to mention in starting out that this matter has been brought forward by citizens to the Public Works Committee and to this council from very early on in this council's lifetime. These citizens have worked diligently at this problem. They face a serious problem, and they were effective citizen advocates in making sure that it got on our agenda. I attended most of the meeting on April 21st, and the citizens again demonstrated a deep knowledge of the issues. They asked probing questions, and my sense of the meeting was what was reported to council, that they agreed with the proposals that the Public Works Department are being put forward. My second comment is, Your Worship, to say to the administration that I appreciate, and I think the Public Works Committee appreciated too, the work which the administration has done on this. Once Public Works Committee indicated that this was an issue that had to be dealt with, I think that the administration worked very diligently, and I want to acknowledge that work. I think it's been extremely helpful and extremely effective. The background to this is complicated. I might just say it comes up in two aspects. One is there's a problem with overland drainage, that is getting the water to flow south back into Wascana Creek as opposed to ponding, or rather laking, in the area, which runs back down into the alleys of Pasqua and the streets affected. So there's the drainage issue. The other issue, the second issue, is the domestic sewer issue. The proposals first dealing with the sanitary sewer issue. There's the installation of the isolation valves that will go forward this summer. That will help take off pressure from the backflow valves, on the backflow valves flowing into the houses, so will help reduce sewer backup into the households, as we've heard. The second part of this sanitary sewer option is the upgrades to the pumping station. Part of that upgrade to the pumping station involves creating capacity at the pumping station, which will again take off pressure off the system as a whole. That's the sanitary sewer aspect. The other aspect is the storm sewer aspect, and that aspect involves replacing and deepening an existing culvert. There is a more expensive option which involved, and I barely understand this, but I understand the problem, creating a J kind of a valve within the system that would take water away from the trunk line so it wouldn't flood. The problem with that valve is that it'll clog up. It'll require heavy maintenance. Anybody with a J valve in their house knows that sometimes this can be a problem. so that the recommended option is to in effect, to redirect the water in a way that will get it into the Wascana Creek system effectively. Those two aspects, the sewer aspect and the stormwater aspect, will, one, reduce very substantially, probably eliminate the backflow problem to houses. The drainage problem, it will take it from a very large ponding to what might be quite a small and manageable set of drainage conditions, which will have the possibility of drying out the land when warmer weather returns and the storm is over. A word on the financial implications of this. The 2015 utility budget proposed included $2 million that will be used to implement these improvements. It was determined that an additional $1.5 million would be required to implement the improvements. It's recommended that 1.5 additional money come from the general utility reserve to the capital account, and it's pointed out in the report that this year the projected year-end balance of the general utility reserve includes $1.6 million that was returned in December 2014. In other words, the balance of the reserve will not be materially affected because the extra money required for these projects, which was not included in the general budget, will come out of money that was effectively saved in December 14. I just want to say again, this, I think, is the best option. It is the most financially viable option. I've been told, and I believe both tonight and having listened at the meeting, that it will make very substantial improvements to the neighborhood, and I'd ask your support for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Are there other speakers? Councillor Price.
Thank you. I'd like to start with a question about if the drainage, part of the drainage issue was going to be solved by the plan that was put forward by the new development. Why does it look like now that we're paying for it, or is that something different that we're paying for?
Ms. Gizmo, you want to?
Your Worship, I'll attempt to start the answer and then perhaps look to others in the administration to help me. I believe it is a different solution in addition to what was approved with the development. I will look to Ms. Wilson to help provide a further response.
Ms. Wilson.
Through you, Your Worship, and I may ask for some additional information from Development Services afterwards, but fundamentally there is a drainage issue in that area overall. The new development, as all new developments, is expected to look after drainage that is related to that particular site, and the work that we're doing is needed to look after drainage issues in general in the area.
Okay. Have we tried this solution anywhere else in Regina?
Mr. Donnelly?
So for the storm system solution, we have tried this throughout other areas, which is basically lower culverts in order for water to flow. For the sanitary solution, we have a similar situation, we have a similar situation in everybody's homes or their backflow preventer valves. Because of our system surcharging, this will be the first time we need to try this solution in the City of Regina. However, it has been used in other municipalities across Canada.
If this was a brand new area, would we be saying do option 3 or option 4? Would we be saying dig it up, put the right grade on it, and get it done? Or would we be saying let's build a backup of a holding tank and the rest of it?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, for the sanitary sewer option, this is similar to other developments that have been recently approved in the city, including Harbor Landing and the creeks. If this was a brand new area, we would still have storage. However, we would have the wastewater mains flowing to the south.
Okay. Thank you for that. I feel I don't often disagree with Public Works Committee, but today I do disagree with them. I feel that we should be digging this up, putting the right grade for these people in the area so that they have proper drainage, that they're not going to be losing sewer systems during a storm event. I think we do live in 2015, and I think losing your access to a bathroom or shower for 24, 48 hours, to me, that's not acceptable. They're paying a fee for their water and sewer, and we're saying that, oh, when we have a storm happening, you're not going to get access to that. So I don't agree with that. I think that we should go the right way, dig it up properly, put the right drainage angle to the piping, and have it done properly. Not that option 3 is not proper. I just feel that option 4 is the better option for this area. So that's my 2 cents on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. I want to add to or ask questions regarding what Councillor Bryce is talking about. If option 4 is put in, or the grading, do we get rid of option 3, A, B, and C, or do we have to add some of A or B or C to option 4 to make it viable and work properly?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, for the sanitary sewer options, we can go with option number 3 as recommended, and if for some reason we find that things are not working as planned, we can then go to option 4, and all we would be losing is those isolation valves that are in option 3.
So if we went to option 4, we wouldn't have to have any of these other A, Bs, and Cs is what I'm actually asking. Or would we have to add? I know we can take away, but if we just go with option 4, what's the cost of that, first of all? Secondly, are we going to have to add any other A, Bs, and Cs to it to add to the cost?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, if we go with option 4, we would not need to do option 1, which is those isolation valves. However, we would still need to do storm sewer option 1. That provides clarity.
Okay. So if I understand correctly, regrading would take into account all of the houses or just one trunk line? Are we talking about one section that would take the whole trunk line? Or are we talking about every home would have to be sloped to meet the trunk line and then the trunk line sloped away? I'm trying to gather what we got to do here.
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, we still need to proceed with detailed design. However, we would be regrading the main on the street to flow to the south and minimal impact to individual homes.
So what if the grading doesn't match the houses? I guess what I'm getting at, because these homes have been there for however many years, if you have a low house and you've now put the grade 5 feet above it, how does that run uphill? And I don't want to say the word, but...
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, so we'll need to look at it in more detail in detailed design. However, I believe there's enough depth between the main and the top of the street to allow it to regrade to the south as the land falls to the south.
Okay, good, thanks. A couple of other things. I noticed that we talk about this as being a drainage issue, and the developer keeps being brought into this. We had this problem well before this developer came forward. Is that not correct?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, this area has experienced sanitary sewer problems in the past, and the area to the east of Louvain has been an area that collects rainwater.
So if I remember correctly, discussions before, the developer that's going to put this, well, he's already building on there, it's actually going to help to push away some of the water, the storm water, that would have been pooling and would have been sitting there because he's now built it up. He's now pulled drains. He's done this. Now, my other question about this is I've been under the understanding that he's going to have, the developer, she, has to put in a drainage system of the tune of about $250,000 for 1 year. Then we're going to get rid of it, and it's going to be pulled. it's going to be of no value, and he spent $250,000 for what? Someone?
I'm not sure if the administrator could answer that.
Through
Ms. Gabriel?
your worship, Ms. Folk would be able to answer that.
Through you, Your Worship, and members of Council. What Councillor Flagel is talking about is specific to 2020 Edward Street. Currently, there has been an appeal put forward and is being heard by the Saskatchewan Municipal Board. So at this point, we've been advised through legal counsel not to comment further.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. I'm glad it's getting looked at anyway. So, I guess what I'm wondering is, like, the lady in front here has now found alternatives to backflow valves that she has been told work. Have we looked at that throughout the whole area, or are we going to just proceed with the way we have it, either with the ABC or regrade the whole system? Does that come into our equation and our conversation as a minor point, or, I mean, it's not going to fix everything, what the lady was talking about, because it's a bigger issue. It's a total neighborhood issue that this has got a problem. So what's our point? I know we have to make a decision tonight or talk about it, but you're saying the ABC, the pump station, the isolation valve, the overflow storm system is the best alternative, or regrading. Is that my understanding? We can't do both in one?
Let's see if we can get an answer. Ms. Wilson?
Yeah.
Through you, Your Worship, the recommendation from the administration is doing its best to balance the benefit to the individual homes and the cost of delivering this service. We believe that option C, in combination with the isolation valves, will protect the homes. It will provide a similar level of service to the level of service that is experienced elsewhere, and certainly there can be backflow that happens during high water events. However, we do believe that it is a good option, and it does address the majority of the issue. Option 4, and the one that is not recommended, is a higher level of service, and it would provide additional improvement at a higher cost. And again, if the option that's recommended does not in the long run provide sufficient improvement, then we certainly could still look at adding on the items from option 4, the grading, and all that would be lost would be the isolation valves. And they would have served for several years at that point.
Okay. I know Councillor Hawkins talked about $2 million and $1.5 million. What are we talking about a cost of regrading?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through Your Worship, in order to implement option 4 for the sanitary sewer is approximately $5 million.
Okay. Okay. Good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Fundura?
Thank you, Your Worship. To you, it sounds there's a lot of trouble here. I've heard over the times we've been discussing with the citizens that we have not looked at, or have we looked at compensating them for their troubles? We're doing a bunch of exemptions for taxes and this and that. Have you looked at exempting the residents having problems? I mean, I'd like to have some kind of answer. Is there an easier way to do this, or is there a simpler way to do that? I mean, we just don't send them a bill, Your Worship?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, it's an extremely challenging thing to look at providing an exemption for this kind of situation. It would be very, very difficult to have good information about which houses might be experiencing this and not letting us know about it. There certainly are target levels of service that we always aim to provide, and sometimes we simply aren't able to. For example, when we have to fix a water line, customers don't have water service for a few days or for a day, hopefully less than a day. During that period of time, there is no adjustment that is provided for their bill. So there's similar locations. What we do is we endeavor to provide a consistent level of service to everyone, which is why we look at situations like this to try and improve them. Providing exemptions would mean quite an extraordinary amount of work to try and make sure that nobody was being left out of such an exemption.
Okay, thank you. So then I'll go, you talked about the isolation valves, and there's a $5 million to go and lower the lines or to dig whatever. And you say that $5 million, or it could, the valves could work for a couple of years. So we're saying that you can observe this or have a look at these isolation valves that they work, but what happens if they don't work the first year? What do we do then? So the question would be $5 million on option 4, and what is it, 1.2, or 1.5, or $2 million on option 1. So what did that look like? I mean, are we looking at stretching this out for a couple of years so we can afford it financially, or what's our option?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship. So the price tags are about $100,000 to install the isolation valves, which are meant to provide some limited benefit right now. We do expect them to work. And then $3.5 million would provide the solution that is recommended by the end of 2016 is the planned installation. If we were to do the other option, that's $5 million instead of the $3.5 million. It includes quite a few of the pieces of the solution we have recommended, but it adds on the grading. Hopefully that helps.
Yes. So for myself to make a decision on 4, I mean, the price of going now and later, so you're just saying that all we're losing is the isolation valves, right? And your worship, and your, as administration is saying, is that for my comfort level is that this will work. Is that what you're saying, to your worship?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, we believe this will work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll go to Councillor Hinks and Councillor Fraser.
Thank you. I sympathize with the residents of Cathedral, and I know we have to find a solution to their problem, but it's not the only part of the city that has flooding problems. I have an area of Normanview West that constantly gets flooded, and I'm wondering if any of these solutions are being looked at the same time you're looking at this with this part of Normanview West. I have a resident by the name of Jerry Harris who has been flooded numerous times, and it seems like he's just being stonewalled by the city with the solution to the problem. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hinks. Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship. Edward Street has some specific challenges that mean that some of the longer-term solutions we're looking at aren't going to provide it a particular benefit. We are bringing at this meeting as well a request for approval to go forward with consulting on our wastewater master plan. Wastewater master plan is intended to help us identify locations and to start to identify what the service level is that we do need to be providing. As well, we are also moving forward or looking to move forward on our trunk relief initiative, which will provide broad benefit throughout the city. So part of this is to work on the trunk relief initiative, which will provide benefit to a large number of customers, and to identify those locations like Edward Street that don't benefit sufficiently, and to identify funds to bring those levels of service up as well.
Would Normanview West be on that list? And I'm hoping they're high up on that list to find a solution to it.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't have any specific information about Normanview West. We do have a number of pieces of work that we continue to do on drainage issues, and I certainly could endeavor to get additional information for you.
Thank you. I'm hoping you'll look into it and get an answer back to me, because the answers haven't been sufficient so far, and this poor guy is just getting pounded, and I'd really like to find a solution for him. Thanks.
Councillor, I know this is sort of off the topic of this report, but your points has been taken. No, your points have been taken, so they'll look into it. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks to the folks that put this report together, and especially thanks to the folks who live in the neighborhood. This has been, I think the nature of living in a city is there's sometimes inconveniences come up, but we have to appreciate that this is a real inconvenience. As Mrs. Silzer mentioned, she had 3 floods in the course of 2 years. That's really an unacceptable level of service. It's been happening for a while, and also that this is a city-borne issue that is actually literally in these people's homes, so it's personal in a way that some of the other things we run into, if it's street cleaning or potholes or anything like that, it's just something really personal for these folks. A couple questions here. Of course, we'll remember, as Councillor Hawkins pointed out, that the start of this conversation for this council was with the development at 2220 Edward Street, which was really one of the first issues we dealt with as a council. So question, how will that development affect these proposed solutions? So supposing that we get done all of these proposed solutions before that development is online, I apologize, I don't know the timeline actually of that development. I know it's well underway, but would we expect for that project to affect these people's sewer situation at all once these solutions are put in place, if they're put in place here tonight?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, for the sanitary system, the wastewater system, there is an option that the development can connect to our pump station and actually improve the efficiency of our pump station. So that development would have no effect on the existing customers in the area.
Can you explain, sorry, how it would improve the efficiency?
Basically, through your worship, by having the wastewater from the development going through our pump station, those pumps can operate on more of a continuous basis instead of an on-off situation where we wear out the pumps early.
Okay, so as far as sanitary sewer goes for the new developments, zero impact we expect on these existing homes if these solutions are put in place.
Through your worship, that is correct.
Okay, and Ms. Silzer had a question about the overland drainage issue, the $150,000 we'll spend. How does that relate to the discussion we had earlier during the approval process for that development permit of 2220 Edward Street?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, the $150,000 that is in the report is to improve the drainage south of the development into Wascana Creek.
Okay.
And the work that the development is doing is to work just to the west of their property, so separate but in very close proximity to each other.
Okay, thanks for that. And final question here. Obviously, again, this was brought to our attention. Part of the special circumstances, this is brought to our attention by a new significant development, 90 rental units going right next door to these folks. But definitely the roots of the sewer issue go back certainly all the way to the 60s, as I understand, when this particular block of Edward Street was put in. What lessons have we learned over the past 50 years or so when it comes to this sort of engineering challenge?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, what we've learned from this particular situation is that we need to be more proactive and plan for the future, and you'll see some of those reports going forward in the Wastewater Master Plan and Trunk Relief Initiative.
Okay, as far as new developments go, I presume we wouldn't expect to run into this sort of dilemma on a new development. Is that a fair assumption?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, that's a fair statement. Our standards have changed substantially where we plan and design for much higher rainfall events, so we would not expect to see that situation.
Okay, thanks for that. In closing, I'll say I think this is an imperfect solution to a very imperfect problem, but I think applauds to administration and the people who are directly involved, and I plan to support the recommendation as it stands. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm going to refer back to a motion that we just passed without reading. It came from the Cathedral Area Community Association. It is signed by Fred Clipsham, Director and Chair of Planning Committee for the Cathedral Village, Cathedral Area. I want to quote what is in here. There was a meeting held on April the 21st. There were 22 people representing 15 households. I have to believe the 15 households were of the immediate area affected. The next paragraph reads, following a lengthy presentation and question period, the Assembly was asked if they now understood the recommended options and agreed with them. There was a very high level of consensus that the proposed options were acceptable. Can I ask the staff first who may have attended that meeting, did they also walk away with that same notion, that one, people understood, and two, that they understood that this was going to be the recommendation, that it was acceptable?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, indeed, we spent 3 hours going through the detailed options, and I walked away with the understanding that everyone understood the proposed solutions and were accepting.
Thank you. And would it be your understanding that the people that were in attendance in the meeting are the people being affected by the problem?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through your worship, in general, yes.
Thanks very much. Full disclosure, Your Worship, I'm not an engineer. Can I ask if any of the people who worked on this project and are recommending the solution are engineers?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, we are.
Okay. Can I ask, because this was identified a couple of years ago, because at budget time there was a request and an acceptance and a discussion for $2 million, that there has been considerable work and effort put into this plan?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, we have spent considerable time and effort on this particular problem. And in further detail, we've completed calibration of wastewater model, which shows we needed extra funding to improve a localized solution.
So the total request now becomes $3.5 million. Can I ask, because I heard it referenced briefly, was there some work done, study done with other municipalities that have a similar problem? And would this be one of those either best practices or newly acquired practices that seem to work toward a solution?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through Your Worship, when other municipalities are running into a situation like this, they do go to a solution like this, which is a best practice. Overall, the best practice is to relieve the wastewater system, which we will talk about in the Wastewater Master Plan and Trunk Relief Initiative in coming reports.
I know that Councillor Fraser asked this, and I want to be real firm to my own mind, because this was a huge part of the discussion when this problem first came forward, at least to my time on council. The new development is significant. The new development will have no impact on this area under question once it's operational. No impact in terms of water, wastewater, and so on and so on.
Mr. Donnelly?
Through Your Worship, so very complex question. For the sanitary sewer system, as was discussed, there's an alarm system, so when that trunk is full, it will stop pumping into the wastewater system and store its own wastewater. And for the stormwater, it is designed to flow around the new development, and once we do our upgrades, instead of ponding, it will flow to the Wascana Creek. So in summary, there should be no effect on the existing customers.
Thank you. It seems to me the neighborhood understands. Seems to me the neighborhood is accepting. Seems to me we have put time, effort, and now dollars in front of this with the best people that we can. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Fraser, you take the chair.
Mayor Fraser.
Thank you. Just a couple of comments, and I want to start by thanking Ms. Silzer for being here virtually every time there's a report that comes here to both committee and to council. Very diligent work and lots of hard work, not just for herself but her entire community. Very important. I want to take us back to when this issue first came forward with the development of 2220 Edward Street. One of the first things we talked about was would this development have an impact on the existing residents of the area, which Councilor Don just spoke about? And we didn't have these particular problems analyzed as they are today, nor do we have the solutions that are proposed on the table at the time. But this council was told very clearly that that development would not have an impact on the neighborhood around. So that's been a principle and supposition we've had from the beginning. Since that time, we've had a lot of work done by the administration and with the neighborhood and with the developers that are developing on the area we're speaking about. And I think we've come to, I'm hoping to, a uneasy agreement that this would work. That the recommendations before us now of the additional $1.5 million going forward that's in the report will be a solution. So I want to hear from the administration. Can we have a report back to Public Works and Infrastructure when this new system is put in place to make sure it's working, to ensure we have a public discussion on if it isn't working, what can we do to make it better?
Certainly, we could bring back a report to provide you an update of how the implementation of the upgrades, what effect they're having, and provide any recommendations if further updates are required or if it is sufficient.
I'd like to make an amendment to do that, to make it formal, because I want to do that, Mr. Chair, so that the public and the residents there will know that there actually will be a report coming back. And I would leave it to the administration to bring it back in a time that I guess in a timely way. So before I move the amendment, when would that be back? Is it 1 year from now, 2 years from now?
I would suggest that we need to, with the implementation of some of these components in 2016, we would want to see them in operation for some time before we can bring back a report. So it would be most likely in 2017.
Okay, I'd like to move that amendment if I could and have a seconder to a report come back in 2017 on the status of the implementation, if it's approved tonight, of the recommendations.
Mr. Chair, I'll accept that with my seconder agrees it's friendly.
Okay, sounds good.
You want to vote on this?
Sorry?
Vote?
Okay, so any clarification, comments, questions on the amendment? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Great. Passes unanimously.
I think this is a reasonable solution, and if we continue to monitor, ensure that if it isn't doing what it's supposed to do in terms of a solution, we will adapt that. This has the attention of this council and of the administration in a way that warrants it, of course, but also deserves it as well. So I will support the recommendations, particularly having a report coming back to tell us how things are going. Thank you. Councilor Hawkins, do you want to close debate?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll make 4 quick points in favor of the motion. First of all, Ms. Wilson's point that this option will protect homes and provide a similar level of service as option number 4, in her opinion. Secondly, as Councillor O'Donnell underlined, that the community at the community meeting on the 21st was in complete agreement with the recommendations put forward. Thirdly, with respect to the loss of service during a severe storm, a loss of sewer service during a severe storm, the point made was that it was quite possible there will be no loss of service, and if there is a loss of service, it'll be under the 24 hours. It's currently the 20 to 48 hours. It's currently the case. And fourthly, if this option doesn't work, we're free to, and your report back will help us with this, we're free to look at option number 4. But it seems to me that it's prudent that we proceed with option number 3 in light of the recommendation of the administration, in light of the community's support for the recommendation, and in light of the fact that it's $2 million less than proceeding directly with option 4. And as Councillor Hinks has pointed out, there are other situations from which we can spend money. Money is an issue here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. The debate's now closed. I'm going to call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Move on to delegations once again. Judith Versick. If you could identify yourself, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Mayor Fougere and City Council. My name is Judith Versick, Executive Director with the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District, and I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of my Board of Directors to present our proposed budget for 2015. The changes in downtown Regina are unprecedented. New buildings such as Hill Tower 3 and Agriculture Place have added and are adding to our skyline. New businesses, both retail and hospitality, have added to downtown's vibrancy. RDBID's mission is to engage in activities that support policies, programs, and initiatives that favorably position downtown as a unique and desirable neighborhood for business and residents. The budget and action plan before you today supports that mission. Many of our upcoming projects are in support of the 2009 Regina Downtown Neighborhood Plan. Our ongoing collaboration with City administration is critical to the success of our downtown. We have worked closely with key city departments on the pre-work needed for these projects, and we look forward to seeing these projects come to fruition. You have received a copy of our detailed budget submission, and I will briefly highlight our plans for 2015. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have with respect to our budget. In 2015, we will continue to clean and maintain the pedestrian environment, facilitate the removal of graffiti, continue to operate the Info on the Go program, continue member outreach efforts through our Downtown Dialogues, member reception, and social media, produce and distribute downtown promotional materials such as the Downtown Dining Guide, Downtown Map, Strategic Plan, annual report and business recruitment material, produce our signature events, Cinema Under the Stars and the Summer Concert Series, expand and enhance the City Square program, begin implementation of the Downtown Regina Visual Identity Program through the installation of prototype signage and street furniture, develop and implement a new downtown art project, continue to support outside parties looking to invest or activate in downtown Regina, conduct our annual downtown pedestrian count, continue to advocate for our members' interests, oversee the redesign and value engineering of the West Pavilion, develop a new 3-year strategic plan supported by extensive community and member engagement. As you can see, the RD bid is committed to making downtown a place where people want to live, work, play, and invest. This action plan, while ambitious, is one that will position downtown for future growth and development, and we look forward to working with you to make it happen. In closing, to support these projects, as well as those I have not mentioned, RD bid respectfully requests a mill rate in the amount of 0.7388 for 2015, and that a provision for assessment appeals in the amount of $5,000 be allocated. We also request that the revenue, expenditure, and transfers outlined in the 2015 budget submission are approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are there questions of delegation? Councilor Fundura.
Thank you, Judith. Good to see you. Question you mentioned about graffiti. Could you just give me a little more about what the costs are, how you're implementing all that, and what's the recovery when a graffiti ends up on a building? How long does it take to remove it? To your worship.
Through you to the chair, or to the mayor. We work, I guess, in 2 streams. One, if it is on a heritage building or on a substrate or material that is more difficult to remove, we advise the property owner of the graffiti, and we direct them to professional graffiti removal services. If it is on, I guess, city property, we refer it to city department, but a lot of times we will just remove it ourselves. We do our best to address graffiti within 48 hours of it occurring. However, there's a little bit of a lag time at the beginning of the season because we're trying to catch up over the winter months, because it has to be a certain temperature in order for us to address graffiti. So we're hopefully hitting that temperature pretty soon. So we'll be addressing graffiti probably a little bit more in the next month or so.
Okay, there's a, to your worship, technical question. When we're removing graffiti, for instance, the downtown bid, there's a right way and a wrong way of removing graffiti. Is there a concern that we put on the environment? What we use for solutions of how we remove the graffiti?
Through you to the chair, we use specific graffiti removal products that have been used throughout other downtowns. I can look into its environmental background, but I do believe that we pick things that are environmentally friendly. We don't necessarily use paint thinners or anything that's really harmful, because it is a risk to us in terms of the health and safety of our clean team.
Okay, and then to your worship, one of reporting graffiti. Is there a program in the downtown district that the owners do report that right away, or what processes you use to get hold of the graffitis if it happens, it doesn't spread?
There's a couple of ways. A lot of the larger property owners, folks like Harvard or the Cornwall Center, will address it straight away. It's their property. They have the resources to deal with it, and they take care of it straight away. A lot of times, because they're out and they have property managers that assess the building on a daily basis, they're able to address it very quickly. A lot of times we do have property owners that will address it on their own without reporting to us. However, we do have communication outreach to them to encourage them to photograph and report it, which we then work with the RPS in terms of putting together, I guess, a tagging library, because there are taggers that have certain styles.
Right.
Yeah.
So, thank you for that. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Fundura. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Good evening.
Hi.
One, is there still a plan to extend your boundaries for the bid?
Through you to the chair, that is correct. I believe we are adding it to our June agenda for the
Okay,
board.
so it's still a discussion item?
Correct.
Okay. This is a comment that was made to me, so I'm going to ask you to respond. There seems to be a growing number of businesses in the downtown that are operational in the evenings that are drawing people almost on the verge of a bit of nightlife. True or not true?
I would say that that is a fair assessment.
And with that in mind, are you therefore then attracting new businesses to the downtown?
Yes, we are, and I believe we are also adjusting our service level. This summer is going to be, I guess, a testing summer, if you will. Places like the Fat Badger have opened on FW Hill Mall, which tends to draw their clientele towards the evening. We've noticed that there were a lot more litter and cigarette butts in that area, so we've had to adjust some of our deployment plans for our clean team. We are also working on gathering these like-minded businesses, the entertainment, hospitality businesses together to joint promote them as a collective destination. So we're kind of hitting things on both operational and marketing, and it's new to us too. We're happy to embrace it, but it's a little bit of trial and error right now where we're trying to figure out what works best for the membership.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Are other Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Judith, what are some things that we might look forward to seeing downtown this summer that will be new in the downtown area?
Through you to the chair, there are quite a few new events that have come online with us. We're working with the event organizers to activate City Square Plaza and Victoria Park. These are new events, evening events. These are things that, again, are that were not common in the past. A lot of the events that we had downtown occurred during the day. So we're very excited about evening activations in City Square Plaza. We're very excited about our visual identity program, prototype signs. I've distributed to you an invitation to our member reception, and we plan on unveiling those prototype signs at that event, so I encourage you to come out and take a look at them. We'll probably be installing them. We're just securing some agreements with property owners, and we'll prototype them this summer, just testing the materials and visibility and typography, that sort of thing. But we hope to move them around through our member engagement outreach initiative. We'd like to bring those benches with us to the Cornwall Center and let people try them, sit in them. Tell us if it's comfortable or if it's not comfortable, so we can make adjustments before we do a mass rollout in future years.
One of the things that you had last year that I really enjoyed was the evening farmers market, where you could buy coupons or tickets and go to the booths and sample the food for your supper that evening. Are you still going to have that happening, do you think?
Yes, we are. There are 4 evenings, 2 in July, 2 in August. I can send you the dates, but what we're really excited about that is we've combined it with our concert series, and we're going to have evening concerts in tandem with the night market on those nights.
Thank you, Judith.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Flegel.
Thanks. One question for you, thanks for coming out, is most downtowns have or are looking for newer businesses. You talk about all your events and stuff like that, which is great. But is there a business that we're missing in the downtown area that you can specifically go after and say, I mean, how can we turn the downtown Regina into Granville Island as an example, or into the 17th mile at Calgary? How do we change that and get, what business are we kind of missing? Besides, the restaurants, the bar business, all that kind of, is there something missing that you know of from seeing other cities?
I think there's a lot of things missing. We did a gap analysis several years back, and there are things like bakeries that we would love to have. We have coffee shops, but a true bakery downtown would be great. butchers, like the cheese, wine shops, stuff like that. Those are things that are in our, I guess, hit list, if you will, of things that we want to target. The challenge that we are facing in our downtown is that there tends to be a lack of available affordable space. So we're going out and we do a vacant storefront survey every summer. So we should be on the cusp of doing that in the next month or so. And then we take those locations, determine with the property owner what their typical lease rates are, and then we go out to those types of businesses and see if there's interest in either relocating or expanding their business to have a presence downtown.
I guess my question to that, Mr. Mayor, more is how do we get 200 or 300 people downtown? And I don't see a bakery doing that. That's what I'm trying to get at. On a grander scale, we have the Globe Theater, which is great. Is there another type of a business, Globe Theater / salsa dance / is there something we're missing on a bigger scale than a bakery and I get those smaller places, but
like a downtown arena?
I don't know. Well, something right in downtown.
I think those are things that we would have to explore on a board level.
Exactly.
But going back to your comment about the bakeries and that sort of thing, I do believe that those types of businesses increase the attraction for residents downtown, and that's what we're really trying to focus on. Getting people to live downtown will increase their patronage of our businesses in the evening. It keeps the eyes on the street, which increases security. So I think it's, a bunch of little businesses will have that cumulative effect that we're hoping for.
I'd also like maybe you and your board to think big as well on that scale.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, first off, thanks for your presentation. I'll pose the same question to you as I did to the warehouse bid director. Looking 10 years in the future, so much has changed in the last 10 years downtown. Where are we going to be in another 10 years in downtown Regina?
I'd like to see the vacant parking lots or the surface parking lots be developed. I'd like to have a true mass transit system that works well for all the users that could be using it. A vibrant City Square Plaza, a redeveloped Gordon Block. I'd love to see Capitol Point built, but I think we would all like to see that built. Obviously, more residents downtown. That's a huge key.
That's great. Thanks a lot for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now consider the report on the downtown bid budget. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward. Sorry, now this thing is acting up on me again. Whoa, that's yours. It's for the budget, Your Worship, but been having technology issues here. You get it? There it is, 48. Look at that. Councillor Fendura, my favorite Ward 5 councillor. Got me taken care of. So, Your Worship, I rise to bring forward 1548. This is the Regina bid, the Regina downtown bid, 2015 budget. Two parts come from the recommendations that the Finance Administration. The City Council approved the 2015 Regina downtown business improvement budget, which is in Appendix A, and that City Council approved the proposed 2015 levy for the downtown bid of 0.7388 mils, and that be applied to the current commercial property within the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District, Your Worship. That's our recommendations. May I have a
seconder for it, please. Councillor Hawkins. Any debate, discussions on it?
Just very briefly, just obviously a lot of great work that happens in the bid, and I know that they're very involved within our community and obviously doing a lot of good work to help increase the opportunities for business within the community. So hats off to the Board of Directors and for those that are part of it. And also, if Councillor Burnett were here, I know you'd have many words to say as well.
Other speakers on the report? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Executive. Only if we have a seconder. Seconder? 10 minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Gotta get this in, because it locks up and it won't switch. I can't get out of report sometimes too.
Well, I do.
Sorry, time to repair back.
Sorry. No, that's okay. I'm gonna have to get this in because it gets out of whack. Well, now it works. There. I can get out. But if I get into something, I can't get back out.
So there's a button on that's at top, but we were talking about that, and yours didn't.
Power down. No, and it still happens. It locks me out.
Though, so you can't.
But that's not what it is, because that stuff works. But now I'm in that, and I can't get out of that report. So I go to try and
There's
get
a
out.
lock to keep your screen only one way, though.
Yeah, but that's not turned on though. I can go to here, and there's a screen lock. That's not it.
So let it flip.
I don't know. There is.
Just over
here it
this
is.
one, it's on top.
Okay, so the lock is on now, so it won't work. But
Sorry,
go back
this
to
one is on top. Where you can't rotate?
But I can't rotate it, but I also can't get out of it. So the only way to get out of that report is to kill the program
That's
and
what
then
I think
reboot it.
is messing with your, it's to do with the lock, because as soon as you locked in, then you got locked into the program as well.
It's only agendas to go though that's affected. So I have to go back out and move back into it again. That's what's been pooping me here.
You having these problems with the?
Yeah. Well, I did the update on it. But, it said, oh, you got
That's what I did
the
too.
update, and things hooped, and now I got all kinds of
Last
issues.
one was there when you heard.
No, we had the hard copy at school, but it's,
Yours booted. So once I went over to Mavis and walked with it, it sped up quickly. But I wanted to hold it up over my head.
Because when I did the re-download, then it wouldn't let me into anything.
well, and since I did the update though, it's so slow. It's choppy. You go to open up stuff in the windows.
Well, wait, you fixed everything else. Fix it.
I did.
So did you read my lips over there when Jerry asked, "Is there anything we could do to better downtown?" And I said, well, that's what Sean said. I said a new Ward 10 council.
Yeah, right.
It's necessary to have a break because there's too many comments being made.
Oh, yeah.
But
That's what Hawkins got right away. He said,
the highlight of the meeting was Fidjura
If I could call the meeting to order, please. Begin with Executive Committee reports on the Riel updated lease agreement. Councillor Fraser.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry, just take a second to drag it up here.
It's report 44.
Great. I'd like to bring forward report number CR 15-44, Regina Exhibition Association Limited update on the lease agreement. So we had a great debate about this at Executive Council here a week or two ago, and the motion coming forward is that we renew a lease with Riel for 4 years instead of the proposed 10 years. The idea being that every council should have a chance to review this lease. So by extending it for 4 years, it gives them some leeway, a window to do work. But also it means that the next council will have a chance to review the lease. Thanks.
Okay, thank you for that. Seconder, please, for it. Councillor Young. Any comments or questions on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Actually, so I brought it forward, so.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks.
We'll be closing debate, though, so just make sure that, because you did sit down. Is there anybody else who wants to speak to it?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So just one quick question. Again, Riel is we can think of it as a municipal version of a crown corporation. It's a private corp in a sense that's a fully owned subsidiary of the city. Supposing that they were to turn a profit at some point, how might the city recognize that profit? Would it be through the lease, or would it be through a transfer? Or, I mean, I don't think that's ever happened, but supposing it could happen at some point, how would the city potentially recognize those profits? Thanks.
Mr. Davies?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, by reporting on an annual basis to Council, Riel discloses their financial performance on an annual basis. So the knowledge of Riel turning a profit at some point in time will be something that they will report on. At this point in time, the financial circumstances of Riel are not in a sustainable position where we could predict long-term or at least short-term profitability, but it is their goal. So at some point, as they can demonstrate that to Council, we'll enter into discussions with them about perhaps showing a return to the city as our subsidiary.
Okay, thanks for that.
Councillor, do you want to speak? Just with the consent of Council, Councillor Hinks wants to speak, although Councillor closed debate. If it's okay, he just has somewhere. Councillor Hinks, go ahead.
Thank you. Spending 10 years on the exhibition board or the Riel board, I know that it's always been in the plan for them to turn a profit and possibly not need the grant from the city. And as the grounds improve, I can assure you they will be making a profit. It's a very well-managed operation, and they have very aggressive plans that will end up, I know somewhere down the road they'll be turning money back to the city as well as not needing that grant. But right now we have to help them out with everything that's going on in there, because it will be the starship of our city. It really will be when they're done, and I know they'll turn a profit in years to come. I probably won't be around, but they will.
Thank you, Councillor Hinks. I'll call a question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Go to report 45, which is the annual general meeting report.
Okay. I'd like to bring forward from Executive Committee report CR 15-45. Apologies, my iPad's acting up on me here again. So this is a report on the Regina Exhibition Association Limited annual general meeting. And the report recommends that City Council give the authority to the Chief Financial Officer as the city's proxy to exercise the city's voting rights at the Riel annual general meeting, and the following directors be appointed to the Riel Board of Directors: Michael Fix, Roy Griffith, Karen Gibbons, Jeff McPherson, Sandra Masters, and Glennis Sylvester. And also that we receive and approve the audited financial statements for the 2004 operating year, approve the passage of the revised corporate bylaws appended in Schedule A of this report, and appoint Vitrus Group as auditors of REAL.
A seconder for that, please. Okay, Councillor Hinks. Any discussion on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Move on to Report 46, which is the voting delegation at SAMA.
Okay, thanks. I rise to bring forward. Thanks. I rise to bring forward reports CR 15-46, and this report recommends that we endorse Councillor Murray as the city's representative on the Saskatchewan Assessment Management Agency's board. So, thanks.
Have a second for that, please. Councillor O'Donnell. Questions, comments? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Fraser, report on the School Board Liaison Committee.
Thanks. I rise to bring forward report CR 15-47, and the recommendation from Executive Committee is that Mrs. Catherine Gagnon and Dale West be appointed to the School Board City Council Liaison Committee for a 3-year term of office effective January 1st, 2015 to December 31st, 2017, and also that Mr. Ernie, I'm going to try my best on this, Simistruck. Is that close? Thank you. And Deborah Burnett will be the Board Administrative Representatives on the Liaison Committee.
Perfect. Second for that, please. Councillor Young. Comments or questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll now move into Finance and Administration reports. Report on the risk management and insurance brokerage services. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 1549, and as you rightly said, it's a request for proposals for the risk management and insurance brokerage services. Recommendations coming from the Finance Administration Committee meeting of April 7th, that City Council authorize the CFO to award and finalize the terms of an agreement to provide risk management and insurance brokerage services for a term of 5 years with a successful proponent chosen from the request for proposal process. And in Part 2, the City Clerk be authorized to execute a contract awarded to a successful proponent identified by the RFP after review and approval by the City Solicitor. Your Worship, that's the recommendations coming from Finance Administration.
Seconder for the report, please. Councillor Fundura. Discussion, comments on it? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. Councillor Hawkins on the wastewater trunk relief initiative.
Thank you. That the City Council authorized initiating the process to engage consulting and professional engineering service for the wastewater trunk relief initiative pursuant to delegated authority, et cetera, and that the City Council authorized the Executive Director of Transportation and Utilities to negotiate, award, and enter into the contract with the highest ranked proponent from the request for proposal process, et cetera.
Okay.
Seconder?
Seconder for that, please. Okay. Councillor Bryce.
Your Worship, I'll be very brief on this. Earlier in the meeting, we looked at a smaller area and wastewater difficulties. This and the next motions deal with wastewater and sewer issues across the city, a larger perspective. Here, the wastewater trunk relief initiative. The city's wastewater system conveys the industrial wastewater into the treatment plant through the McCarthy pumping station. It performs reasonably well in dry weather, but there's indication that during wet weather it surcharges. The assessment indicates that overall the wastewater collection system is only capable of managing approximately a 1 in 5 year storm event, well below the target of 1 in 25 year storm event. This motion seeks to attain engineering reports that would advise on how we could bring that up to the 1 in 25 year standard. One final point, funding in the amount of $1.5 million was approved as part of the budget. Consulting engineering fees are expected to exceed $500,000 from this commission, and therefore Council's approval is required.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Are there other comments on this? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. I'd like to get some clarity. The pumping station on McCarthy is in my area. I've visited it, and I've heard many comments about that. So my first one is just because I don't know. How come we only have one pumping station? Why would we not have 2 or 5 or 6 or whatever? I don't know. How does that work?
Through you, Your Worship. So we have multiple pumping stations throughout the city of Regina for wastewater. However, they all converge on one station, which is the McCarthy Boulevard Pump Station, that pumps 5 kilometers to the west to our wastewater treatment plant. Just how our city was designed, and in the next report, you'll see of things that we'll be looking at to expand that scope.
Okay, thanks. When a new development is under consideration and constructed, at what level, 1 in 25 or 1 in 3,000 or whatever, do they build to? What's our standard for a new development?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through Your Worship, for a wastewater system or sanitary system, they are to meet a 1 in 25 year level service, and for a stormwater perspective, it's 1 in 100 year level service.
1 to 100. So would you say that is industry standard, or is that a prairie standard? Where would we fit into that?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship, that would be a best practice in the prairies.
Good. Thanks very much. Although I realize you made reference to what could come later, I'm curious, does the McCarthy pumping station get bigger, stronger, faster in the next while, or what happens to it?
Mr. Donnelly?
Through you, Your Worship. So the report we're looking at now, the Trunk Relief Initiative, the plan is to reconfirm some of the work we've done in 2014, and as of today, we expect that we will be increasing the hydraulic capacity of the McCarthy Boulevard pump station, including a third force main and new pumps, to be able to pump more wastewater to the wastewater treatment plant.
Thanks for that. I know that a few years ago, 2, 3, 4 years ago, there was some work done on the pumping station. Could you walk me through what that was and how that relates to this?
Through you, Your Worship. Just so happens that I do have detailed information on that one, as I was involved. That basically took care of the wet weather side of things. So put in new screens, put in HVAC equipment, put in electrical equipment. The upgrades that need to be done now are to improve the pumping capacity so we can pump more flow.
I got you. That's what I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Other questions? To close debate? Sure.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll close, but before I do that, I just have one quick question, prompted by Councillor O'Donnell's questions. What happens if the McCarthy pumping station fails?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Your Worship. So if the McCarthy pumping station fails, there's a number of things that would fail, but if we lose power, we have backup power. But if it fails, we can open up valves and discharge to the creek.
And just following on, has it failed in recent memory?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Your Worship. No, our McCarthy Boulevard pumping station has not failed. We do lose power every year, and we have backup power to handle those situations, but the station itself has not failed.
Thank you very much. I recommend this to Council. It's clear that in order for our city to grow, our trunk system has to be expanded, and this study seems the appropriate way to go. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'll call a question now. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next report.
Thank you, Your Worship. CR 1551. Again, the system in broader perspective, that City Council authorized the initiation of the process to engage consulting and professional engineering services for the wastewater master plan pursuant to delegated authority, et cetera, and that City Council authorized the Executive Director of Transportation and Utilities to negotiate, award, and enter into the contract with the highest ranked proponent from the RFP process for the wastewater master plan. I'd seek a seconder for that, Your Worship.
Seconder, please. Councilor Bryce.
Thank you very much. And I'd just say that this is a master plan to look in a comprehensive way at the wastewater system with a view to answering a number of questions which are itemized in the reporting, including developing the level of service, modeling by computer the system, looking at population servicing need, infrastructure renewal, stakeholder involvement, the drainage system, the trunk relief initiative we just talked about, any preferred alternatives, and the impact of all of this on service agreement fees. All of this planning, long-term planning, to be done through the wastewater plan that is set out here.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Findura.
Thank you, Worship. To you, I have a, oops, there you go, I lost my page. One question on the master plan. If I missed it, grease that ends up in our system, that is a lot of problems. And I've noticed since we're moving into the new age and we're moving to accepting newcomers into our city, I've noticed the habits and things that we put into the sewer. And I do believe that there's been a lot of sewer backups in areas where they've never had sewer backups, and it's happening. So the question is, in this master plan, what is it going to look like to have somewhat of a education piece, or figuring out what we need to do to prevent some of this grease ending up in our sewer system? Because when you think about, I could dump it something into sewer here, and then ends up a mile down the stream. So I'm not sure if I didn't see anything in this report or that will talk about specifics. So is there something to your worship that we can, if I can get an answer, or we can put into this report?
We'll find out. Ms. Wilson?
Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship. The issue that Councillor Fundura has identified is more an operational issue, and it is one that is on our current agenda to work with. So we do have work going into a program, our source control program. We are working with communications to develop an improved source control program, and we are certainly doing work with the bylaw in the near term, both with regards to the septage receiving station, which is being will be constructed, and also to look at source control in general within the city, with a serious focus on fats, oils, and greases. So it's not so much something in the master plan, other than some considerations about how we might be designing, but it is really an operational issue, and one that we are working on now.
So then the one question about the education part of it is it somewhere in your operation that we're going to be doing something? Because I mean, that is definitely a problem, and that problem that costs us quite a bit of money.
Through you, Your Worship, we will certainly be working with communications to develop an education program as part of the overall communications program.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Ventura. Other speakers? Councillor Donald?
Thanks. I'll just follow that up before I ask my own question. I wonder if, do we have a process when somebody decides to build a restaurant using that as the likelihood of grease in a larger quantity, that at permit stage, do they have to have a whatever you call the jug to collect it? Do they have to have that, or is that a possibility?
Through you, Your Worship, through the circulation process, it is reviewed, and they do have to catch it, so there is a requirement.
Oh, good, thanks. I want to ask a question about stakeholders as listed in here, but specifically, we spend a lot of time talking about regional planning, and I'm wondering, in terms of this study, where does regional planning come into that?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Your Worship. So the wastewater master plan will look at the big picture. So part of the thing that it'll look at will be a regional wastewater treatment plant on the east side, primarily for the city needs, with context to other developments. So it will review those options in general terms.
So obviously there would be a consultative process with those. Is there any financial commitment from those outside of our borders to help with this study?
Ms. Horlock?
Through Your Worship, we're in talks with our regional partners to talk about that, because it would be a portion of the study would feed into this study. So we are in talks with our partners to the east.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Other speakers on the report? None to close debate? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. To our next report. This is the wastewater plan award RFP.
Thank you, Your Worship. I move CR 15-52, recommendation from Public Works and Infrastructure. One, that City Council approve the transfer of $150,000 from the General Utility Reserve to the capital account U4023 to bring the budget for the water master plan from $500,000 to $650,000. And two, that City Council approve the award of an RFP for professional engineering services to the highest ranked proponent, AECOM, for the water master plan at a cost of $615,255. So, Your Worship, we've dealt with drainage at this meeting, we've dealt with wastewater at this meeting, and now we're dealing with water. And this is a motion about the water master plan.
Second for that, please. Councilor Bryce.
Thank you very much. I just point out, as the report indicates, the key elements in the master plan for water, developing a level of service, developing a capital upgrade plan for a population of 300,000, a water conservation plan, an emergency response plan, updating of the water demand module, looking after population servicing needs, infrastructure renewal plan, collaboration with key stakeholders, developing solution options, and recommending a preferred alternative, and incorporating preferred solutions into the utility and service agreement fee models. So, master plan for water.
Good. Thank you, Councilor Hawkins. Are there other comments or questions on this? Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you again. In terms of regional or the notion, we are partners with Moose Jaw on this idea. Where does Moose Jaw fit into this plan? Are they part of this, or are they doing their own? Do we collaborate?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, to a very large extent, this plan is related to the water as once it comes to us at the plant and pumps to us, that's where this plan kicks in. So the city certainly does work with Moose Jaw and with the Buffalo Pound Water Treatment Plant with regards to the capital program at that plant, and there is a suite of projects, but that is not part of this except as regards the issue of continuity of service.
Good, thanks for that. I seem to recall a presentation at one time where we have an agreement with water flows all the way from the mountains through Alberta, through Saskatchewan for us to have water. So can somebody confirm, is that true that we have agreements so that in fact we have water? Because we don't have water if we didn't have that.
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't have a lot of information about that. The province is responsible for the water system and for granting permits and volumes of use and so on. So that's how the city has allocated its water, and the level in Buffalo Pound is controlled through Gardner Dam and so on. So there is a whole the whole structure, but that would be managed at the provincial level.
Okay, thanks. So I'll just follow it up with, so we have grown considerably in population and we are projecting. So is there a portion or a time that we start going back to the province saying, by the way, you knew we grew, and by the way, we are growing? How does that, or do they just magically know that and open the dams bigger?
Ms. Wilson?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't have a lot of specific information about that, but I could undertake to get more information if it would be desired.
Yeah, I'm more interested in terms of growth and water and supply. Don't need that now, but I think when some of these things start coming back, I would ask that question again. So I'm not in immediate need. I will make one other comment. I think we've spent considerable time tonight talking about the utility reserve. And maybe I should, in fact, compliment us, not us, but previous council for the idea of having a utility and then having a reserve, because we have the financial resources to make sure that we are continually investing and in terms of what we need to do. And I just think that's very wise. And the reason I say that in part was I was at a meeting the other day with people from Alberta and Manitoba, and they were asking about utilities because it's not necessarily common in some of these other areas, especially rural municipalities. So a compliment to our forefathers.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other speakers? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move on to Planning Commission, a development at Harbour Landing. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. We're going along quite swimmingly here, and if anybody wanted to talk about heavy trucks on Dudney, I'm open to that right now if you want to take a break, or if you wanted to talk about parking enforcement, or should I just carry on?
Let's stick to the script.
Okay.
That's good.
So I'm going to bring forward a discretionary use application plan, group of apartment buildings, 5501 and 5601 Parliament Avenue, Harbour Landing subdivision. If I could have a seconder.
Seconder for it?
Thanks. So I'm going to bring forward an amendment first, because the address, in fact, has been adjusted The address should in fact read 5500 Parliament Avenue. So if I could ask for that amendment both on this report and any subsequent bylaw, please. I have a second for that.
Councillor Hinks.
It's just simply a correction.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thanks very much. So I'll carry on in terms of the report. This is a planned group of buildings. To give you a context, this is on the very edge corner of what is currently Harbor Landing. This was always a planned high-density area. We pushed back on this a little bit because of some of the design and some of the trees and shrubbery and so on that was there to make sure it's clear. So the documentation that you have in front of you is accurate. You'll note that there was also a little pushback in the number of parking stalls because of a lack of parking along the major street that goes along here, Parliament Avenue. I also want you to know that the people who own Beaudry lands, we've talked about that a few times here, have watched this and made sure that this was an accurate assessment in terms of that street. And so we were, after all those pushbacks, shall I say, we were comfortable with both the development that's here and the tone and nature of what's going on. I would also point out that this is a rental property. This is a significant number of rentals, and that we still see people wanting to invest in our rental stock. So our vacancy rate will be continually be affected. And in fact, we have, as these people have come before planning not just this development, we've asked specifically about that, and they are very comfortable in our economy and want to continue to invest. Concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Are there other speakers to the report? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question for the administration. I drove out there this afternoon, and really there's not much to see except an empty field at this point. But Kitty Corner, there are houses, and they're protected by a sound barrier from Parliament Avenue. Is there any provision in this plan for any kind of a barrier that would protect these buildings from sound coming off the street adjacent to the development?
Charlotte?
Your Worship, I'd defer that to Ms. Folk.
Ms. Folk?
Can you clarify your question again, Councillor Hawkins?
Yes, I can. This is a field right now. Kitty Corner of the field, there is a housing development, and along the housing development, there's a sound barrier. It's a concrete or a panel sound barrier that protects the houses from the noise of the road. Is there any kind of barrier or sound protection for these units from road noise?
Through you, Your Worship, no, not a permanent barrier. Of course, there would be through landscape buffering.
Was there any questions been asked for that, about any concerns expressed about that?
Ms. Folk?
Based on public input provided with the development, no, there were no concerns expressed.
What public input was there?
We went through our typical process in terms of providing notification through the impacted area.
I read your report carefully, and you indicated that you advertised and that you had no responses. That seems surprising to me, and that's why I drove out. The reason you had no responses is a vacant field doesn't respond to notices. I'm wondering if there's any input from the administration on the question of sound protection for this development.
Ms. Folk?
I'm going to defer that question to Mr. Searle.
Mr. Searle.
Your Worship, in the review of the application, that was not identified as a technical issue with respect to any sound barrier. As Ms. Folk has indicated, there would be street trees required and landscape buffering along the street continuously along the Parliament Avenue property line.
Thank you. Your Worship, I don't feel that this is an adequate examination of this question. On the basis of this, I'd like to move that this be referred back to the Planning Commission so that they can explore the possibility of sound barriers for this development as exist along Parliament with respect to the other developments in Harbor Landing.
You want to refer this back to the Planning Commission?
The Planning Commission, who I imagine will seek advice from the administration.
I'll need a seconder for the motion. Seconded? Okay, it's a referral motion, not debatable. I'll call the question on referral back to Planning Commission. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. Other speakers on the motion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. City Manager's report on supplemental report on Victoria Avenue East pedestrian crossing options. Could we have a motion for this, please? Put it on the floor.
I'll move the disposition of the recommendations from the City Manager report.
And seconder, please. Councilor O'Donnell. Speakers to the report. Councilor Fundura.
Thank you, Your Worship. I took quite a bit of a lengthy consideration about what's happening in the east side. So I'm just going to be very brief. My concern is that we are going to cut off the access to the pathway continuing south, safe and continuing access without any interruptions. That's my biggest issue. What I've been looking at is interruption by a street, a light, or wait at a safe zone. So that's my worry about that. And the second one, this was always discussed for years. If you look at the area, how long this has been debated, this particular Coleman pathway, it was always talked to as being the below grade. So my question would be, the years of built out, the years of development in the area around Vic and Coleman in the close area, why did the plans change? To Your Worship.
Ms. Casmo?
Through you, Your Worship, when we considered the bridge replacement on Victoria Avenue, which was the critical component of this project due to the current condition of those bridges, we did consider an alternative of an underpass that would be incorporated within that bridge replacement. However, the recommendation that is being made by the administration is that not be built due to a cost benefits, technical issues with that option, and operational challenges that would pose. Specifically, the bridge would need to be very large, very wide, which would exceed the requirements or our standards for an underpass of that type. We have concerns for safety, and of that location is that it's out of sight, and there could be some septet issues. Additionally, the access to where that pathway would be located poses some accessibility challenges, that it would require switchbacks to get there, and that would in turn create some long-term operational challenges. We believe that the location and the elevation of this pathway additionally would incur flooding seasonally, and there would still be a need for an at-grade crossing. So for those several reasons, the recommendation from the administration is that we don't proceed with an underpass, but that we provide an enhanced at-grade crossing that actually facilitates the connectivity of the multi-use pathway in the area.
Okay, so I'm going to continue, Your Worship. Well, I'm worried about the at-grade crossing, because if you, and with the enhanced features, first is safety. When you look at what we're talking about here, we're going to probably have, 8 lanes or more. So it's a very wide crossing, and it's going to be, you're going to need to educate your children or someone with disability or senior to cross that particular pathway. Would either be really quick or have lots of guts to stand in the middle of the road when the world's going by you. So that's my worry. Second one is, my worry is with the stop and go traffic. I mean, we know what happens with stop and go traffic, and that Victoria Avenue already we have lots of stop and go traffic, and that creates a lot of racing and creates a lot of speeding. When you prevent someone from continuing and you put another light to stop them for a longer period of time, someone's going to race to get to the next level. So one more comment, Your Worship. Reading all that, I debated lots about the option one. I'm looking at it not in favor of that option, but at the same time, I will not stand in the way of the bridge. The bridge do need, and this has been going on for years, and I don't want to be the one that I stood in the way of putting a new bridge in or bridge collapsing or stuff like that. So I understand that. But at the same time, I'm not happy that we have somewhat forgotten about that corridor. That it's going to, because this was discussed for years, that we're going to have a clean, safe, continuing pathway connecting to the south of Victoria and make a walkable community. So, but I'm not going to stand in the, Your Worship, I'm not going to stand in the way of progress. So, if I could make give a notice, a referral motion, if I could do that now, or because I can only speak once, Your Worship.
You can only speak once, so if you're going to do
if I could do a referral motion and then
put it forward, and we'll see if it's in order. Go ahead.
Okay. I do understand that the challenges around Coleman. We had the probably 11th and up to 12 hour already. So the motion would be, Your Worship, that investigate the Prince of Wales as the location of the pathway. How would we cross Victoria Avenue? That means is to investigate around Prince of Wales and Victoria. If that would be a better spot for. I don't know. I don't think we can go under, but somehow a little more safer way of crossing Victoria Avenue. Would it be a better way to have it on Prince of Wales and Victoria? And then again, if it's possible, to incorporate that into our transportation master plan. So, Your Worship, I'm not sure if the transportation master plan is coming here pretty quick. If we don't have time, how long would it take for the administration to come back with something to give us something how Victoria and Prince of Wales would look like? Worship.
Ms. Gizmo?
Your Worship, the transportation master plan, you're correct, is due to come forward to council in the next few months, and that master plan will help to identify some of the short-term and long-term plans for the pathway system within this area, and in fact throughout the whole city. What I might suggest is that could inform the specifics that you would like us to take a look at. Well, Prince of Wales is actually likely a better location due to the potential growth opportunities and the connectivity to the pathway system. We could certainly do that, but I might propose that we keep it broader so that we look at the best options for the area that provide the connectivity for the multi-use pathway within that area, and with the considerations of the recommendations coming out of the transportation master plan.
I think I'm okay with that. So,
that's, I want to be clear, that's a referral motion?
Yes. Which
is not debatable, so I want to make sure everyone understands what is being asked here. Pardon me? No.
And then once
this is a for the administration to look at the Prince of Wales as the conduit for the multi-use pathway, as opposed to the Coleman area. And this would be looked in terms of the transportation master plan overall. That would include how you would transverse Victoria Avenue as well.
Yeah, some suggested wording I could provide is that the administration consider future potential enhancements and infrastructure options to support an active multi-use pathway system in the area of Victoria Avenue East. This wouldn't preclude us from just looking at Prince of Wales, but looking at the broader area. To that, we could also add that we look at this in association with the recommendations from the Transportation Master Plan.
Consider and report back.
Yes.
Okay, this is only for clarification, not debating, just to clarify. Councillor Hawkins.
The clarification I seek is that, as I understood Councillor Findura's motion, he was dealing with very specifically the connectivity of the path. My concern with the wording, and I just want to be clear on this, the administration has put forward, is that it involves a much more vague concept. So the point of clarification that I'm seeking is, will this address the connectivity issue that Councillor Findura has raised?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, perhaps Ms. Harlech could add some additional information. The current Pathway System does have pathway systems on each side of Victoria Avenue on Prince of Wales, and that can serve as a main connectivity point for the or connective point for the pathways through that system. I'll ask Ms. Harlock to add some further information.
Through you, Your Worship, that's correct. When the Transportation Master Plan comes forward, they actually do look at Coleman and Prince of Wales as both areas for the connectivity of our pathway system. Currently, they are showing them both as at-grade crossings. So what we can do is go back and look at what other options could be feasible and bring that forward when we bring the Transportation Master Plan to Council.
Thank you very much. Subject to Councillor Findura agreeing that that addresses his issue, that seems to address, specifically Ms. Harlock's answer, seems to address the specific point that I was confused about.
Are we clear? Councillor Findura, are you comfortable with that?
Your Worship, I am comfortable. Do I have any more time to add a few things to it?
Pretty much use your 5 minutes.
I used up my 5 minutes? Okay.
Referral motion. When can we expect a report back? Ms. Warlock?
Through you, Your Worship, it'll be here before the end of Q2. I believe it is next month.
Good. If we're all clear on the motion? Referral motion, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Other speakers to this report? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a question for the city manager. And it really goes to the form of this report.
Didn't we just refer this?
Or we may have just referred it.
No, we referred to study.
Referred to study.
Not this report in front of us. This report is still on the floor for debate.
In that case, I'll pose my question to the city manager. It deals with the form of the report. On page 5, dealing with option 2, and on page 7, dealing with option 3, the following sentence appears: the additional $5 million required by the city to provide the underpass would equate to a mill rate increase of approximately 2 to 3%. My question is this: first of all, what does that mean, a mill rate increase? Is it a permanent increase? Is it a one-time only increase? My second question is, I've never seen in all the reports I've read before council cost increases, specific cost increases stated in terms of a mill rate increase. I'm wondering if why it's happened in this case.
Mr. Davies?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can't comment on the editorial nature of the question, that being why this has been used in this particular instance. Subject to Mr. Archer's comments, the amount, the equation, it would equate to a one-time cost. So a one-time tax increase to meet that cost would be approximately as is presented in the report.
Ms. Hawkins?
My question is simply this: why in this report, in this form? My concern is that it's, I think it's inflammatory.
Mr. Davies?
Mr. Mayor, through you, I don't think the intent is for it to be inflammatory. Obviously, to the reader, that's how it's coming across. I think it's an attempt to put in context what the quantum, the effect of it that would have on the base budget.
I just want to, on a point of order, just so we're clear what we're doing here, the motion that Councilor Findura put forward was in addition to the current motion ahead of us. It did not overtake this report. So, in other words, you'd have the referral was the second recommendation of this report, to be clear. So I'm ruling that this report is still on the floor for discussion. I know the clerk asked me that question, and others were wondering. The report's still open. We have the same recommendation we had before, with an additional referral that's not debatable anymore. So it's been passed. Councilor Donnell.
Thanks. I want to ask about, because the word bridge renewal or replacement is here, I want to ask about bridge construction. The current bridge that's there is a wooden structure. Am I correct?
Through you, Your Worship, one of the structures is a timber structure and one of them is actually a concrete structure.
And the timber structure has been there for how long? Any idea?
I apologize, I don't have the exact original construction date.
Okay. I'll follow that up with just a slight deviation. I notice an awful lot of railway bridges are made out of timber. And my comment is that these bridges, I never see them get repaired. I don't know when this little bridge on Victoria East was ever repaired, but we oft talk about concrete repair. Can you help me on that, to understand that? Why don't we build more wooden bridges? Maybe that's what I'm asking. I don't know.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through Your Worship,
Yeah.
I'm not a bridge expert in this area, but what I can comment on is that they fail or have failures in different ways. Concrete can be more susceptible to things like salts and things that corrode the concrete, where timber is not as susceptible to that. However, there might be cases where timber is not as strong as a concrete bridge. So there can be different rationales for the type of structures.
And I understand, and again, when I went for one of my recent walks and saw the train going over the wooden bridge, I was caught by that. So I just leave that as a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Dow. Other speakers on the report? Councillor Fraser, could you take my place for a moment? Just a couple of comments on the report. I want to thank Councillor Verdure for bringing his perspective forward, both at committee stage and at council tonight. And I think we had a bit of a confluence of different purposes that came together that didn't quite get to where we wanted to go. And what we have now, I hope, is a potential resolution to the issue. If I use the term, the collateral damage of doing the bridges today is that the walkway underneath that will no longer be there. It's not in the design. And that discussion didn't take place at a committee or council as to why it was going to be that way. So we're past that, because I don't think anybody wants to delay those bridges being reconstructed. We already had a weight restriction on it a couple summers ago, which got the province's attention finally on doing their funding through the Urban Highway Connector program. So that all being said, the report before us still has us approving option one, which is enhanced at-grade crossing. So I've had some discussions with the administration today, and we talked about what that would look like. And notwithstanding that we're going to look at in the future, perhaps the pathway going further to the east on Prince of Wales, that won't happen for some time. Won't be tomorrow, won't be next year. It'll be hopefully soon, but not in the immediate future. If you look at this intersection, we have to make sure that those who are young children, parents with young children, crossing Victoria Avenue, have a chance to get across there without stopping in the middle. I can't imagine if you're trying to exercise or take your kids out for a bike ride, you've got to stop in the middle of Victoria Avenue and wait. It's just not safe. So I'm hoping that the administration will enhance when pedestrians want to cross. There's lights there or a sign that says this is part of the pathway system, and people get a chance to get over that without having to stop. Now, I want to confirm we had the conversation to say that you will look at that, through you, Mr. Chair, to the administration, we'll look at that to ensure that those who cross over Victoria Avenue, until we see a final solution, will be safe.
Your Worship, the design for an accurate crossing will take into consideration the average crossing time that's required. It will add additional time for pedestrians to fully cross Victoria Avenue during that signal time. Additionally, a midpoint activation button will be pushed in some cases to add additional time when crossing, or if someone should get stopped, to activate to make sure it happens again. Additionally, as you had suggested, we will look at ways to identifying this location as a major crossing for pedestrians and cyclists, such that pedestrians motorists are prepared to stop and wait for pedestrians to cross.
So we'll have greater recognition of this being a crossing for the pathway system, perhaps flashing lights, something to that extent. We will have a system in place that people will be able to cross this without having to stop in the median as well. But if they're slower than usual, they can always reactivate it again. This, to me, is very critical, given that this is now an even wider street, 8 lanes. It's a long way to go when you have small children on a bike. So, on that basis, I'll certainly support the report, knowing that the solution we'll be looking at will be, hopefully, Prince of Wales, which is a more natural place to have a pathway system. There's more green space there. There's already walkways there in any case, gravel walkways anyway. So I'll support that. Thank you. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm just thinking about the surface of those at-grade crossings. Would we consider concrete, or would we still be using asphalt? I guess the reason I'm asking is if anyone's tried to cross one of those crossings where you've got heavy truck traffic constantly going, we end up getting divots in the road and impressions. Frankly, if you're driving your vehicle and you drive up onto one of those impressions, you'll actually be pulled back down in. So they are quite hilly. And of course, if you're trying to push somebody across a stroller or even just people walking, they'll end up stumbling and tripping on that if it's still asphalt.
Excuse me?
Your Worship, the current recommendation contemplates asphalt that would have some rut mitigation characteristics to it, but we could certainly look at if there's an option for if concrete does make sense.
You know, when I think about, Your Worship, the Victoria and Ring Road, that whole area is concrete in there, and we did that about 10 years ago, right shortly after I was elected. That happened. And today, that's still a very smooth, easy to cross, and there isn't a whole lot of ruts in that area. So although the cost is much higher for concrete, I think from a safety standpoint, it's obviously a lot better, I think. So that would be my preference, would be to see that. I would approve an additional expenditure as long as it wasn't way out of line, but it's obviously going to make it safer. Pushing a bike or walking or stroller or cane. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other speakers on the report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Information report on Public Works Infrastructure Committee. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. IR 15-7, recommendation of Public Works Committee that this report be received and filed. This is a report dealing with Victoria Avenue East between Prince of Wales Drive and Coleman Crescent, bridge replacement and roadway widening and improvements. It deals with many of the issues that we've just discussed. I'd move that it be received and filed.
Seconder for that, please. Okay. Councilor Hinks, for discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Public Works once again. Councilor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whoops. Please bear with me for just a moment here. Thank you. As a recommendation for Public Works and Infrastructure for receive and file, increase in engineering services for the design and construction of master plan drainage area 2B, Albert Park. Last summer, there was considerable flooding in Albert Park, right from Highway number 1 down Pasqua, down south a very considerable way. A number of streets were impacted. A number of houses had considerable flooding. The city came forward with a plan in June to alleviate that flooding through the construction of a retention pond near Ethel Milliken School. There was a second downpour. That second downpour showed the city and its engineers that the original plan was not sufficient. The city went back over the winter and devised a new plan. The new plan provides for a retention pond near Parliament and Pasqua, I believe, and also putting in trunk lines that are bigger, much more effective plan. That work is underway. It's involved the removal of some trees, but they will be replaced. The residents have been kept fully informed. There's been no pushback, at least that I've heard, to it at all. People are happy with this plan, and this reports on that. I must say I'm very pleased with the attention the administration had paid to what was a significant problem in Ward 2, extending down, I believe, into Ward 3 as well. I move receive and file.
Thank you. And a seconder for that, please. Okay, Councilor Price, discussion on the report. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Just a question I have. I appreciate what's here, and I'm all good with it. I noticed that we have a number of water retention ponds. I pretend not to know a whole lot about this, and I don't go for drives in heavy rains to look at, but I actually had people say to me they don't see water in these, and so they don't know. So my question is, do they in fact catch water, or is this on one of those 1 in 100, or when do they actually kick in?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, I will have Mr. Doney add to this, but I can say from first-hand experience, I saw the one at Grant Road Park filled completely full during the storms of June of last year.
Yep. Thanks.
Mr. Downey?
Through your worship, so it depends on where the detention pond is located throughout the city, but typically during a 1 in 5 event, they would fill with water. So during any major rainfall event, clean rainwater will flow into those detention ponds, be stored for approximately 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, depending on how long that storm lasts. Then they will drain into the storm system.
So do they automatically drain, or does something have to open?
Mr. Downey?
Through your worship, the nice thing of these detention ponds is they're very low operation maintenance, and they automatically fill and they automatically empty based on engineering and elevations.
Good. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other comments on the report? Councilor Dar.
Your Worship, question on the, talking about Milliken School, I think there's a Prospect or Proctor Place where there are 2 large catch basins. How do they operate? Because I know that residents in the area been flooding, and the question in the area says since we've built Harbor Landing, their situation of flooding occurred. There was a large catch basin, 2 of them. I think it's Prospect or Proctor. Prospect Place. So in a large storm, it could be a 2-day or whatever. How does that work? To your worship.
Mr. Downey?
Through your worship, I'm not familiar with the particular catch basin that you're referring to, but in general, the pipe system or the underground system is what we call a minor system, and that system is to convey stormwater during a small rainfall. Once a larger rainfall happens, those pipes will fill everywhere in the city, and we need to rely on what we call a major system, and that is our roads, our detention pond, to convey that rainwater to the storm channels and ultimately to Wascana Creek.
Okay, so the question I'm going to finish with, when we build a subdivision, does that subdivision create problem for another subdivision beside it, an older subdivision, where I'm hearing stories where Harbor Landing is causing issues for Albert Park? Am I correct, or am I just going, what would the answer be for that?
Mr. Downey?
Through your worship, so when any new development is proposed, one key factor is to ensure that it does not provide any hardship to the existing residents. So in particular, Harbor Landing is designed from a stormwater perspective to meet a 1 in 100 year level service, and that goes to the creek. So that stormwater system is completely separate from the stormwater system in Albert Park. And to get into more detail, the wastewater system also pumps into the same trunk, but that wastewater system goes into storage when that trunk reaches a certain capacity, and we go into something called online storage. So it also has no effect on the residents in South Alberta.
So then, to follow up on more groundwater, is that some of the some of the percentages of flooding that's been going on in Albert Park?
Mr. Downey?
Through you, Your Worship. So over the last number of years, we have had significant rainfalls, which contribute to the amount of groundwater. We need to separate the 2 systems out. So we have a storm system and a wastewater system. But yes, as the groundwater increases, we get more water getting into our cracked and deteriorating wastewater pipes. So it's important that we reline those pipes. But yes, as the groundwater increases, it does have an effect on flooding in general. partially because the ground cannot absorb any more water.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Frondera. Other speakers? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Last report tonight on the Mayor's Housing Commission. If I could have a mover for that, please. Okay. Any speakers on the report, just to go through it? This is the annual report of how housing in general is working through the Housing Commission, and the report is very detailed on the success we've had over the last year. So, mover, seconder, Councilor Bryce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Last bit of business is the bylaw. Councilor Fraser.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor. So I move, seconded by Councilor Murray, that bylaw number 2015-24 be introduced and read for a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
Yeah, I move, seconded by Councilor Flagel, that bylaw number 2015-24 be read for a second time.
Any questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
I move, seconded by Councilor O'Donnell, that council hereby consent to bylaw number 2015-14 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councilor Hawkins, that bylaw number 2015-14 be read for a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.